hasn't started yet.
We haven't started.
I will remind everybody, and we'll get everybody's name for you. Don't worry, we're nice. All right, we're live. All right. We're going to call the meeting to order. It's February 27, 2024, Bridgewater Township Zoning Board of Adjustment, regular meeting. It's just after 7 o'clock. Both adequate and electronic notice of this meeting specifying the time, place, and manner in which such notice was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6, specifically on January 9, 2024. Proper notice was sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger and filed with the clerk at the Township of Bridgewater and posted on the Municipal Bulletin Board. Please be aware of the Zoning Board of Adjustment policy for public hearings. No new applications will be heard after 9:30 p.m. and no new testimony will be taken after 10 p.m. If you're able, please rise for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, Roger. If we could have a roll call, please. Here.
Here.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm here.
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 Here. All right, thank you very much. The transcription is live tonight. We have a person taking those notes, and she's asked that we all speak into the microphone. Hopefully you all can hear us. And what else would you like me to ask the board? To please spell their last names? I can just go down the roll for you. Want to start with Mr. Kulak at the end? If you could just spell your last name for the transcription purposes, please.
Sure. Kulak, K-U-L-A-K.
CCAT, S-I-C-A-T.
Bongiorno, B-O-N-G-I-O-R-N-O.
Widely, W-E-I-D-E-L-I.
Foose, F as in Frank, O-O-S-E.
Oller, O-L-L-E-R.
Mrs. Amin, could you just say your last name and spell it for the record for our transcription person?
She wants you to just
Spell your last name.
and spell it.
A-M-I-N.
Yeah, she could probably
My
see
last
all
name.
these plates, I would think, right? By now, we're good?
Sweeney, S-W-E-E-N-E-Y.
Good? All right, you got it. All right, and just a quick announcement. I want to mention Gary Laspiza has tendered his resignation. Gary's been a member, probably
I'd
about
say
8.
about 6, 7 years.
It's been great having him. For those that don't know, he works in Trenton. He's always been able to bring kind of great color and legislative information to the board. He's going to start coaching Little League this spring. You know, those are moments we get with our children. I think people forget we're all volunteers. And I told him, go for it, be a great coach, and hopefully he makes the major leagues. And I just want to wish Gary the best and his family the best. It's been wonderful having him on the board.
I'm going to echo what Chairman Foose said, and also on behalf of the zoning board, I want to put a special thanks to the employees downstairs, Roger, Joanne, and Nancy, for all the work they've done the last several months for the zoning board. I know it's been very difficult and busy to get everything together for us, but believe me, you make our lives a lot simpler. Thank you to all three of you, and Roger, I think, is the only one here right now, but the others know too. Thank you.
Thanks. And at this time, I'd open up the meeting to members of the public that would like to speak on any land use issue that is not on the agenda this evening. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion, and we're going to go on to board minutes. And we're going to start with the January 23rd reorganization meeting. And I know, Mrs. Amin, the first change we had was the time was incorrect, right? All right. Aside from the time, any other changes or comments on the January 23rd reorganization meeting minutes? Can I get a motion?
I have a second comment on that one. Under the roll call, Mr. Claudio West was present.
She needs to talk into the,
Changed from absent
she can't hear.
But these are, this is just board administrative business. I don't know if you need to transcribe this.
You know,
Yeah.
under the roll call,
Yeah.
Claudio,
And let the record reflect, Mr. Gajewski is here, and it's 7:09.
Claudio Rescue changed from absent to present.
Okay, Mr. Vesio should be absent.
No, he is out, he
Oh,
is
he was,
present.
he was present.
Because under all the voting, his name is there, and,
Okay.
for the next meeting, he was present.
On my notes, he was present.
Was he absent?
I have him here.
Right, it was just a thing, it just got changed from absent to
All right.
present.
Could I get a motion?
I move.
Those, he was here, Mr.
Here, we're
President.
changing it.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yes.
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 All right.
Yes.
All right, next up is the January 23rd, 2024 regular meeting. Changes, comments?
And SEO is present for that. so,
Yes.
Okay.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Yes.
Yes.
Couple of changes that I was going to make.
Do you want to give them to Roger?
Just give it to Roger.
I'll give it to you, the changes that I have here.
So yes with changes.
All right. So it's under Kulak. So certain changes, I'll give it to you.
Okay, thank
Give
you.
it to during break.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All right, next up, number 7, we have resolutions. I know a few members had some changes. Mr. Kulak?
Yeah, I have just one change, but I think it's significant, and I have a few comments on the Somerville lumber resolution. We had discussed during the meeting the importance of allowing this business to operate as it had done in the past. That is, it was a wholesale distributor of lumber and building products with a small retail operation that was determined to be an auxiliary use at that time. And then when I read the resolution, I saw a lot of terminology around the warehouse aspect of this business, and that kept coming to my attention. And I thought, well, I'm not exactly sure that it was declared a warehouse by anybody. And during the meeting, I made a point of saying that we have to be very careful in our terminology. So I can live with the description of the business as a warehouse, but I thought we should add one small thing to the resolution. It's on page 8. It's at point number 1. And it's about halfway down. It says, any substantial modifications, and I want to add, or intensifications to the allocated uses shall require further approval from this board pursuant to, and then we list the MLUL reference. So that's a change I would like to make.
Yes, I've reviewed that with Mr. Kulak, and thought that was appropriate. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for all your help with that. And Mr. Kulak, I appreciate you took a lot of time. Even though it's only one word, I think it's substantial, and thank you for that. Mrs. Amin, I know you had a change as well?
One small change, which is on page 4, all the way to the bottom, second last line from the bottom, where it says, he testified that a railroad
Traverses.
Traverses. All right.
Okay, yes.
So I just put this back to the board. We worked hard on this. This was kind of a crazy case, and Open to any other changes the board may have.
I move with the 2 changes.
All right, Mr. Widely, Mr. Bongiorno was a second? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
All right, and that brings us to the application portion of our meeting. We have tonight Bridgewater Realty 2 LLC, 1288 and 1298 Route 22 and Morgan Lane. We got to, okay. Okay, this is our meeting. This is the zoning board. I'm the chairman. I really want to help you, but you need to communicate what you need me to do because I'm not following what you need. All right, so we're going to open it up to applications. And like I said, this is Bridgewater Realty 2 LLC. What can I do to help you? Okay, that's easy. All right, so if we could all use our microphones. All right. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Henry Kent Smith. I'm with the firm of Fox Rothschild. I'm appearing tonight on behalf of Bridgewater Realty. We are before this board tonight on a property that actually has a very long history, both before this board and the planning board, involving a site that's at block 222. It's now lot 6.01. Just so the board understands, this property is a commercial condominium. What that means is the property is held in common by the 3 owners of the property. So you have the Houlihan's that's no longer in business, that is now being renovated for, I think it's Stone Tavern. Then you have the hotel site that was approved by the planning board in 2019. They've graded the site. They're in the building department now for the building permit, and they hope to start construction in the very near future. That was a Cambria Hotel that was approved, again, by the planning board in 2019. As part of that 2019 approval from the planning board, we had also proposed on the corner property, which is technically Unit 3 of the condominium, a Goddard daycare educational facility, 10,000 and plus square feet Goddard Day School. That, unfortunately, has suffered the fate of many daycares in the pandemic. The pandemic effectively really hammered the daycare industry. In addition, with more work at home and less in-office work, believe it or not, the demand for daycare is not what it used to be. And finally, the bottom line is we're not having as many kids today as we had earlier in our history, and therefore the demand for daycare has fallen. So we are here tonight because we need a use variance under section D1, 70D1 of the municipal land use law. That is a commercial use variance. This board, I'm sure, is very familiar with commercial use variances and the burden of proof and what I have to demonstrate on behalf of my client to sustain any positive action that this board may take for this proposal. So what are we proposing? In the location of the Goddard Day School, on that parcel, we are now proposing a Starbucks. I hope I don't have to explain who Starbucks is. They're somewhat endemic to our present economy. You see them everywhere. And so we are requesting a Starbucks because the Starbucks is a drive-through. It has a drive-through window, and drive-throughs are not permitted in the zone. That renders the use itself no longer permitted in the zone. So we will be requesting tonight a D1 variance for a drive-through window. This property is located in the HIC, that's the Highway Interchange Commercial Zone. It's just right at where 22 and 287 intersection is located. And so with this application, we are not modifying any other component. The hotel is the hotel. The Houlihan's now Stone Tavern is the Houlihan's Stone Tavern. We're not making any changes whatsoever to either one of those portions of the property. It is just where the Starbucks will be proposed, where the Goddard School used to be under the 2019 approval, and that is what we are before the board tonight.
Well, let's talk about the 2019 approval, because in all of our packets, and it's called a rider to the application, and I'm going to quote, "The following pre-existing nonconformities have previously been approved by the township and do not require further variance relief." Now, I'm going to finish. The 2019 board, the planning board that met and approved this case, certainly left some things to be desired. In my opinion, it led to a new mayor being elected in our town. Not this case in particular, but actions of that planning board. That's my opinion. But this board is not going to recognize anything that that planning board gave you, because this is a totally different use. So if you could address the rider to the application, it doesn't have a date, but I think you know the document I'm speaking to.
I know exactly the document.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, and again, we agree and will pursue each and every variance on its own without precedent. In other words, what happened in 2019 before a different board for a different use. We acknowledge that we now have to prove each variance that we are submitting before this board tonight. Again, just a little background. In considering a commercial use variance under criteria D1, the Supreme Court has established some guidance for the consideration of bulk criteria. Since the use is not permitted in the zone, many of the bulk criteria would not be applicable to the use. So the board should be reviewing the entirety of the application, everything, as though it was one package. That includes the use and the bulk, the design criteria, to make sure this board is satisfied that in our presentation tonight, we meet each and every criteria necessary for this board to take action. So, agreed, Mr. Chairman, these are variances for which we will be requesting this board grant, independent of any prior action.
So is there anything else this board needs to know that the 2019 planning board granted that you're not going to be asking for, besides, it looks like you're looking for design waivers, but are there any other bulks?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
So if you would like, Mr. Chairman, I can go through the bulk variance relief.
I think it would be helpful because of this rider to the application. It was a bit confusing.
Yes.
And it was in all of our packets for this meeting.
Understood. Understood. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, so in terms of the variance relief that's being requested, the first one is a front yard setback requirement of 100 feet, which is required under the ordinance, and 96.3 feet is being proposed. The next variance is rear yard setback and buffer requirement, 75 feet, plus 125-foot buffer is required, where 120 feet is what is being proposed. That is a second relief request. Third relief request is deviation from the side yard setback and buffer requirement for accessory structures, where 50 feet is required and 125-foot buffer is required, and here we have 135 feet, which is being proposed as part of this application. In addition, we will also be seeking a building setback requirement from Route 22. That requirement is 200 feet under the ordinance. We are proposing 119.4 feet as part of this application. There is a canopy overhang. That overhang is 113.8 feet from Route 22. There is a deviation from impervious coverage. The ordinance has a 60% maximum impervious. And we are proposing 60.5% impervious coverage. So that is slightly in excess of what the ordinance standard is. There is also a setback requirement for the proposed monument sign that faces on Route 22. That setback is 25 feet under the ordinance. We are proposing an 8-foot setback for the monument sign. In addition, the number of freestanding signs that are permitted on the building, I believe we actually, if you look at the entirety of the sign package, it's probably going to be 5, because they're 2 very small signs, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that you will see in our presentation that we did not think were warranted treatment as a sign, but if this board so considers, we will so request. There is this parking setback requirement of 100 feet. That is required, and what we are proposing is 57 feet parking setback for the Starbucks, and from Morgan Lane, it'll be 20 feet setback from Morgan Lane. And finally, we request a variance for not providing a separate loading space as part of the Starbucks application. There are also design waivers, which our engineer will get into relative to things such as landscaping and parapet height on the building. I do want to note, though, for the record, that the planner identified a variance for fence height of 8 feet, where 6 feet is the maximum permitted. That fence is associated not with this Starbucks, but with the hotel. And that had been previously approved by the planning board and is not being modified because that's part of the hotel's approval.
So you'll just point that out and
Yes.
wondering where that is?
I did. So in terms of the application before the board, I have a number of witnesses that I intend to bring forward tonight to present the entirety of the application. My first witness will be Eric Mund. He is the owner and operating officer for Bridgewater Realty, the property owner. My second witness is Liz Ann Kyle. She is representative of Starbucks, and we'll go through in detail Starbucks' operation, why they are looking at this location, and everything related to how Starbucks operates. My third witness is Rob Michella from Gladstone. He is the site plan design engineer, and he will be discussing with the board the site layout. He'll be discussing variances and design issues relative to design waivers. My next witness will be Benjamin Horton. He is a project architect for Starbucks, and he will review the building architecture as well as the facade signs. And we will be providing the board then with a more detailed analysis of the building signage and the variance request for that. My next witness will be Gary Dean. He's a professional traffic engineer from Dolan and Dean. He undertook a traffic analysis, and he will testify regarding traffic. And my final witness will be Michael Tobia. He's a professional planner. He will be providing the planning testimony relative to the requested use and bulk variance relief and the basis for the board's, if it was so inclined, favorable review of the variance request and site plan. So with that, I just want to make sure, Mr. Chairman and board, that we are properly vested with jurisdiction. I have submitted the affidavit of publication and all of the supporting documentation for the notice.
Mr. Smith, I've reviewed the notices. They're in proper form. It was published timely and served on homeowners within 200 feet timely, all in accordance with the list, so the board has jurisdiction.
Thank you very much. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call Mr. Mund as my first witness. You will be swearing.
Would you just raise your right hand, please? You solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
For the record, would you state your full name, please?
Eric W. Mund, M-U-N-D.
Thank you, Mr. Mund. Appreciate that.
Business address?
Yes, give him the address, please.
429 Market Street, in Saddlebrook.
So, Mr. Mund, you are the owner representative for Bridgewater Realty?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mund, could you just bring the microphone? Thank you.
How's that?
That's much better.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mund, then explain your relationship to the property, kind of a little bit of the background and history, and what brings us to this board tonight.
It's held in a number of different family members. We purchased the Jack O'Connor's site. Anybody familiar with Jack's? We purchased the Swedish barbecue before, was it the barbecue? Yeah, Swedish barbecue before that in 1981. Ran Jack O'Connor's with Jack for a period of about 2 decades. Jack wanted to retire, and we wanted to keep building restaurants. We built the Houlihan's in 2002, and we did that in conjunction with an application with Homestead Village. I'm sure nobody remembers that. That was an application in 1997 or 98. That application was brought up on a prerogative writ case from our friendly neighbor, Mr. Boychuk, who used to own the Holiday Inn. We were stalled for a period of 3 years. Got the restaurant going in 2001 and got it open in 2002. about 5 years or so ago, as we were entertaining doing the Wood Springs, what was the previous application? Wood Spring Suites?
It was a Wood Spring Suites, and then it switched to Cambria.
Cambria, and then, okay. And while we were entertaining that and had that in front of the board for a change of hotel use, the corner piece became available. And that was purchased by my brother and I outside of the rest of the family. We had proceeded with the purchase, and we had had a contract in 2019 with Goddard School. The local operator was the same person who operates the Goddard School in Hillsborough. And once COVID hit, we made a joint decision. It was primarily her as the driver to not go ahead and build the school. Her finances changed dramatically during COVID because the whole office market dried up, and they're the demand generators for childcare. So we were on a tenant search. I much rather would have had a child care center there, but that went away, and we waited for several years, and we got some indication from Starbucks that they'd like to be on the site. We have an agreement, and we're proceeding and with this application, and I hope that brings us up to date.
And just so the board knows, in terms of the Houlihan's, I had made representations. If you could confirm who is going to be coming in there.
Oh, I should have been a little more clear. We operated the Houlihan's for a period of from 2002 to 2018. Houlihan's Corporation then bought out all of my Houlihan's interests. We actually operated the restaurant. So they purchased our interests in 2018. Then about a year and a half later, they went bankrupt, terminated the leases on about half of their properties in New Jersey. And unfortunately, Bridgewater was one of them, where I also happen to be the landlord. And yes, it's going to be a Stone Tavern. He's under renovations right now. It's Mr. Desiderio. I'm not going to be operating the restaurant.
Now, in terms of the hotel, I made some representations just
Yes.
regarding the status. Could you confirm relative to the hotel and its construction plans?
I had a call I've sold the rear portion of the property to Mr. Richard Bojani. He operates a dozen or so hotels in New Jersey and a number in Florida. I said, Richard, how are you doing with your construction schedule? It took him several years to recoup the losses he had sustained during COVID, and now he's faced with very high interest rates. He sees his operating numbers tend to be getting better, and he's anticipating interest is going to come down. He's anticipating construction between 4 to 6 months from now, and he told me specifically he does have his plans in front of the town for review.
Can I ask you a question? I'm
Sure.
confused. On the where you want to put the Starbucks,
Mm-hmm.
would own the property and the building, and Starbucks would operate it then?
Yes, I'm gonna do all the site work and build them a structure.
So you would own the property and the building?
Right, but I would not be operating the restaurant.
Okay, so you're more like the landlord?
I'm a landlord, yeah.
Because you said like with Houlihan's, you would actually operate it.
I did in fact operate the Houlihan's for a decade and a half. I am no longer operating restaurants. I'm getting too old for that. So,
Hard business. I don't have any other questions relative to Mr. Mund. If the board has any questions relative to the property itself?
Yeah, let's open it up to members of the board, and then we'll open up to members of the public following that, and any board professionals that have questions.
I have a question.
Document, the planning department report.
mm-hmm,
Familiar with this?
yes,
In a couple of pages 3, 4, and 5, lists all of the variances that are being requested.
mm-hmm,
And this question is probably for Robert, the site plan layout guy. There are a lot of variances, and I asked this
Sure.
to the applicant when they go over more than 10 variances. Sorry.
Turn it on.
It's on.
So did someone, you, or you, I'm sure you had to have an idea of what was going into this in terms of the variances requested.
Yep.
Is there nothing that could be done to minimize 19 variance requests?
What I'm going to do is, I typically go in as I still have an operator code, operating restaurants. And I defer to my tenant, and I defer to who is the operator in this case. So I understand what their concerns are for making a restaurant work. And I'll also, if I may, defer to my experts, because there may be some ability to limit the variances here, but I don't know, because we have to balance that with the needs of the operator, with the desires of the town to limit variances. I think a balance can be struck, but I will leave it up to my tenant and to my experts. So,
And Robert will have
yep,
all the details on all these variances.
yes, he will.
I will save the rest of my questions for Robert. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question regarding on that property, there is a Houlihan's that's closed down. So is there any plan for the Houlihan to reopen again?
It will,
No,
it will not be open as a Houlihan's again.
it will
It'll
be,
open as
that
a
building will be
own tavern.
demolished?
Yeah. It'll be similar in that it'll be a full-service, sit-down, American-style variety menu restaurant, kind of like a Houlihan's, but it's not going to be branded a Houlihan's anymore. It's going to be branded Stone Tavern. The operator has a restaurant in Clinton? Phillipsburg. He has one operating now, and it's not a branded restaurant like there's 150 of them around the country. So I'm sure he'd like there to be 150 restaurants in the future, but not yet.
I'd like to ask you a question about the ownership structure of the land. You had pointed out earlier that you and your brother at some point bought the parcel that had become available to you.
Yep.
And then that was, I'm going to say this, and I need you to correct me if I'm wrong, was incorporated into the entire parcel, and then that parcel had undergone a conversion into a condominium, land condominium type structure?
Yeah, yes, that is correct.
So far, we're okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So as you look at then the components that make up the property, the operating businesses that will be located there, are they free to, in some ways, share common areas? Is there a border that is sort of ironclad that separates the Starbucks from the Stone Tavern from the hotel? I'm a little confused about how that land condominium operates with respect to the flexibility the businesses have.
They share maintenance responsibilities and payment obligations. They share easements for right-of-way, and they also share parking in common. But for a small check-in area in front of the hotel, there's like 10 reserved spaces up front that are just for check-in, and a couple of to-go spaces in front of the Houlihan's.
And there'll be a similar situation with the Starbucks relative to, I think, 5 or 6 spaces that are immediately in front of the Starbucks will be similar to the hotel reserved spaces and the to-go spaces that are in front of the Houlihan's, soon to be Stone Tavern.
Okay.
Other than that, it's a common easement that covers the entire property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may? Please. I've got a question or two about the hotel. That's not there. According to the ordinance that's in effect here, a restaurant's a permitted conditional use in the HIC zone only in conjunction with a hotel or motel use. Must be associated with a hotel. As I understand it, the hotel plans were approved 5 years ago?
The preliminary hotel plans were approved in 1997. It was a homestead village.
So some of these plans go back a whole lot of years.
Yep,
Where's the hotel?
it's not there.
Yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah,
Why isn't it there? I mean, supposedly this restaurant can only be built in conjunction with a hotel. there is no hotel. Why should we grant the relief you're looking for?
Well, I'm probably going to defer to my planner on that. Just, I'm not trying to pass the buck, but I don't understand the intricacies of zoning the way my attorney and my planner do. But I know that if there were a demand for a hotel early on, it would have been satisfied. Also, in the case of the Homestead Village, it was approved during a boom time for hotels, and the hotel was approved, and then my lovely neighbor stopped me with 3 years' worth of litigation, and the town at that point decided, well, look, Munn's doing everything he can do. We're going to give him his permits and let him build the restaurant. So thank God they did, or I would have been frozen. So.
You referred to the boom that went on in town, I think specifically referring to hotels.
Yeah, I'm not referring to the town specifically, but in general, hotels were going through a pretty good time back in the late 90s.
Okay, and I think that was probably true of Bridgewater as well. In fact, there's a number of hotels that were approved, some of which are on Route 22, that were never built. It seems as though there's an oversupply of hotel space. There's nobody rushing to build hotels. So when you tell us there's going to be a hotel in this site, I don't get it. I don't buy it.
I hear you.
Mr. Sweeney, can I jump in for a second? You said before that there was an understanding with the company that owns the site that the hotel is going to go on. What type of understanding is there?
Are you talking about previous, back in the 90s or recently?
Talking about now.
Present.
Oh, I sold my property for over $2 million to a guy who's in the hotel business. And I said, look, Rich, you got to tell me, what are your intentions? I'm going to stand in front of a board full of people, and you got to let me know what's going on. I have to be able to tell them with a straight face what's going on. He said, I'm going to be moving on the hotel in 4 to 6 months.
So there isn't an MOU, there is a contract for him to build this.
There was a contract for him to buy me out, and he bought me out with a site plan approval, which I obtained for the change of his brand. So we got his brand approval changed. He went and paid me a whole lot of money for the property, and he's locked into doing a hotel.
Thank you.
What's the flag for the hotel?
Home 2 Suites by Hilton.
Mr. Smith, I just want to clarify that this application is not a D3 application,
No.
correct? Has nothing to do with whether a hotel is built or not. It's strictly a D1 variance.
That is correct, Mr. Aller. And the reason for that is the D1 variance is the most extreme form of relief. It's the most difficult to get. D3s are actually easier. Rather than try to shoehorn this in something that it isn't, we're going for the D1 variance to meet our proofs.
Right. So, Mr. Sweeney, what they're saying is they're asking for permission, approval to construct the Starbucks with no regard to whether there's a hotel or not, right? The ordinance talks about combining a hotel with a restaurant as a conditional use. They're not here as a conditional use applicant. They're here as a straight D1, not permitted to do it this way under the ordinance.
Give them relief from the township ordinance that required the hotel with the restaurant.
Correct. Correct. So they'll have to prove that the restaurant is, there's the different proofs under D1 versus D3. So they'll have to show that it's, there's specific reasons for that hotel, the restaurant, and why it works with or without the hotel. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other board questions? Board professionals? Questions for Mr. Mund?
I actually do not have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I also,
Me, Burpee, you are.
and this is Nick Dickerson here, I also do not have any questions of this witness.
All right, and we'll have plenty of time for traffic down the road.
I don't have any questions either, Mr.
All right, I'm going to open it up to members of the public that have questions on Mr. Mund's testimony. Please, if you could just come on up, Mr. Mund, if you could just yield the dais there briefly. we can just get your name and address, please.
My name is Bill Vreeland, V as in Victor, Reeland. I live at 7 Stanford Drive in Bridgewater. And I do agree with you, Mr. Sweeney. I don't see a need for the hotel there. It's a 120 one-room proposed hotel, and we do seem to have an excess of that in the town. I believe it would be like 4 stories tall, and would be right in.
Mr. Vreeland, this is only questions with respect to his testimony, and P.S., this application is not an application for the hotel.
Okay.
Right, they're not looking to make any changes on the hotel. All we're asking right now is for questions as to what this gentleman said. There'll come a time later after the applicant has completed all of their testimony with all their witnesses where you can come up and give testimony, make any statement you would like to the board.
Okay. Well, as far as Starbucks goes, that would become, in my opinion, a traffic issue. But that might not be, relevant now.
There'll be traffic testimony later from a traffic engineer, and you can ask that engineer traffic questions.
So right now, it's just Mr. Munn, what he said, anything you want to question him about? And he talked about the legal structure of the property. He talked about some of the operations. So those types of things that you question on his testimony. And at the end, after everyone's spoken, I'll give you as much time as you want to speak for or against this application.
Okay, then I'll wait then, all right.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public, please, come on down.
Yeah, John Merton, 184 Adamsville Road.
Your last name?
Last name is M as in Mary, E-R-T-E-N.
What was the address again?
184 Adamsville.
Thank you.
It's not clear to me who's the owner of these properties, if there's a singular or multiple owners. And the reason I ask that is that later parts of the documents, there's a lot of references to who is responsible for certain maintenance and other things of that nature. Is it now, if it's only going to be Starbucks, is more Starbucks responsible for the maintenance of all the things that are being advocated for? Or is it going to be them and somebody else? Where's the ultimate responsibility end and lie?
Good question. So, Mr. Munn, can you identify the owners of the 3 units and who has maintenance responsibility for what?
Unit 1 is owned by Bridgewater Realty LLC, which is a combination of Charles Mund, Eric Mund, and Charles Mund Sr. It's my dad. Bridgewater 2 is owned, I cannot remember the entity, but it's owned by Richard Bojani. He's the fellow who's the Home 2 Suites franchisee. And unit number 3, which is the property in question for the current application, is owned by Charles Mund Jr. and Eric Mund. And you asked a question about the maintenance responsibilities. Would you like me to elaborate? Okay. All 3 units are going to be run by a condo association, which is responsible for the maintenance of, and that maintenance drills all the way down to picking up the litter, fixing the potholes, repaving the lots when necessary, plowing, and that's all going to be run by the condominium association, which each holder of each individual unit is a member of that condo association.
What about snow removal?
That will be done by the condo association. They'll hire a guy. We'll probably hire the guy who's there now.
Just one?
So, well, you don't need one. So,
I'm kidding.
it's currently a fellow who I use in Hillsborough.
Okay, what about the skins of the buildings?
But the exteriors, they're going to be maintained by the owners of the condominium unit. Like, I'm guessing every 10 or 15 years or so, Starbucks is going to do a remodel of the property. I'm not sure about Mr. Desiderio, who will be running the Stone Tavern. But each individual unit owner will be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of their individual buildings.
Okay, But the sidewalks and paving will be done by the association.
That is correct.
So the additional clarification I'm asking for is relative to the reports relative to stormwater management and the observation and reporting of storms that have more than 1 inch of rain that need to be submitted to the professionals here for review. And it says that the owner of the property is responsible for getting somebody named to do those reports. So I'm curious as to who is that qualified individual that would be doing that.
And are you able to answer that?
You know, the condominium association will be responsible for compliance, but I don't know who the individual or the entity is that's going to do that yet.
So the association will retain someone, much like they're going to retain a snowplow contractor, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, there's going to be additional testimony, I would imagine, by your engineer that's going to talk about stormwater management, and it's probably going to be in the deed, how that's taken care of. So I think there'll be a lot more opportunity for that question to come up. You're welcome. All right.
Could I ask another
Sure,
question?
sure.
Again, I'm looking at the planning document, and it says that the minimum lot area is 5 acres, and you're talking about 6.788 acres. That's just for Starbucks, or that's the whole plot?
All 3 condominium units are 6 and change acres. The Starbucks itself is about 1.5.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public? Questions? You good, Rich? Yep. All right.
Okay, thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Mr.
much.
Mund.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to excuse Mr. Mund, and then my next witness is Lizanne Kyle.
Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you state your full name for the record?
Lizanne Kyle,
And spell your last name, please?
Kile.
And Ms. Kyle, if you would be so kind as to give the board your experience and your role and relationship to Starbucks and your knowledge of the operation of Starbucks.
So I am a senior store development manager. I am a Starbucks employee for almost 18 years this April. And my job is to find locations for Starbucks stores. And then we get them built and then turn them over to our operators.
But you're also familiar with the general operation requirements of Starbucks.
Oh, I am, yes.
And so, first question then is, what directed you to look at this subject property for the location of the proposed Starbucks?
So this property was particularly interesting for us because it is on Route 22, and we have a lot of customers that visit us on their way to work, on their way home from work, at lunchtime, and it was also a large parcel. So since the pandemic, as we all know, there's been a rush to get into the drive-through line, and this parcel in particular provides for a very long line. So we feel so very confident that it will serve customers, and our partners, which we call ourselves employees, will work in a really good atmosphere because it'll be a lot of room for cars to maneuver the site and to service those customers inside as well.
So why is a drive-through window so critical to Starbucks operation?
You know, the U.S. customer has gotten so used to the convenience of drive-throughs, especially since the pandemic. You know, it's like touchless way to get a product that you want. And people are just so used to being on their phones in the car, answering emails while they place their order, driving up to the window, picking it up, and being on their way.
Now, I'm sure this board is familiar, as am I, with a lot of Starbucks that are located like in shopping centers without drive-throughs. Is that the model that Starbucks is now, are you still pursuing that model, or are you moving on to a new mode of business here?
No, it's a new mode.
Okay. And this is being driven by customer demand?
Yes.
So one other aspect of the proposal is that we have both indoor and outdoor seating as part of this application. What is the attraction of having outdoor seating? Why do you do that?
So we call ourselves the third place, work, home, Starbucks. And people like to come and have meetings. They like to connect with friends, family, and they like to sit outside if it's nice out and enjoy a cup of coffee and meet people and just gather together.
The other aspect of the application before the board is there are some parking spaces directly in front of the Starbucks. They even have like a 5-minute sign on them.
Yes.
What is that for? What are those spaces about?
So we call them MOP spaces, mobile order and pay. So if you have the Starbucks app, which I hope everyone here does, and they drink Starbucks, but there's a coffee for everyone, so I got it. But you can order your drink, run in, pick up your drink, and that's like just a quick parking space for you to do so.
I do want to go back to the drive-through, just in terms of how it's operating. So the proposal before the board tonight will show 2 lanes that come into a singular point for ordering. Can you just describe how does that all work? For example, the number of cars that you would expect in line. How long does it take a customer from order to pick up? Those kind of questions.
Okay. So the Y lane is a vehicle that we came up with to help circumvent a backup in the drive-through. So you can pull into one lane or a second lane and then merge an order. So it's just a way to try to kind of ease the flow so that we can serve as many customers as possible in a timely manner. And the timing piece of it that you're referring to or asking me about, from the point that you order a drink at the menu board to pick up is about 4 minutes. And we need that time because each order is an individual order. Everyone prefers their coffee in a different way, so we need that time to create the coffee drink.
Now, another aspect is that this is a proposal for a freestanding Starbucks, as opposed to something that's attached to another building. Is there any particular benefit that relates to Starbucks having a freestanding building?
The fact that we can circulate the building better versus having other tenants with us and trying to really not bother anyone else.
And with regard to your parking, the parking for your patrons who are going to be dining inside or on your outdoor patio, do you normally have that parking located similar in a location that you have for this proposal where they would be crossing the drive-through lane after the pickup window?
We do.
And have you ever had any issues, concerns, problems with how that parking and pedestrian circulation works?
No, it's usually striped for a crosswalk, plenty of signing.
And so from an operational perspective, then you don't have any concerns relative to the location of the parking? Okay. Now, getting back to what drew you to this particular property, being on Route 22 on a high-travel highway, is that good, bad, indifferent for Starbucks?
Oh, it's good.
And why?
Because of the volume of traffic.
And why is that?
Because those are potential customers for us.
So in terms of your customer traffic, do you normally just sort of draw your customers off of the flow of traffic?
Absolutely.
And just explain a little bit about how the psychology of that works for your customers.
Not sure I understand, but
In terms of why is it? Why, is it, hey, there's a Starbucks and I need a coffee, or do people actually go out of their way to get their Starbucks?
it's a little bit of both, actually.
Can I ask Ms. Kyle a question?
Sure.
I, like probably everybody here, I've been to Starbucks at one time or another, and I know that if depending on what you order, it could take a couple of minutes to get your coffee. So I know how most drive-throughs work, but are you going to have just one lane? Can you explain to me how you place the order, where you pick it up, and how you deal with the cars while they're waiting.
So the menu board is at car number 7. So if you come into the drive-through, let's say it's the Y lane, and I think we're going to have a visual later. Is that right?
Yes.
A visual later that will help you see the Y piece of it. The cars will merge. Then they'll get to the order board, place the order, and from there, it's 4 minutes to the window to pick up your drink.
Okay, so you could have a couple of people order within that 4-minute time frame could order their coffee. So the cars could be stacked up there, correct?
Stacked 1 through 7.
Thank you.
In terms of your
At the end, you can come up and ask.
your operation, do you, in terms of if somebody had like a really big order that was in the drive-through, do you have an exit way for them to park their car while their order's being prepared and then brought out to them?
We usually don't have to do that, but if there's an instance where we do, we absolutely will.
All right. Now, if you could explain, what is it about signage on your freestanding building? Why is signage important to Starbucks?
Mostly safety reasons,
And why is that?
to cue people around the correct way.
In terms of, when you say queue people, so that people know how to enter into the drive-through to circulate through the site?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. And let's just go through a little more on terms of operational questions. What are your hours of operation proposed for the location?
5:30 to 10, Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Sunday.
Now, in the times where you are not open for business, does Starbucks have any objection if this board were to say, hey, why don't you reduce your nighttime lighting level after you close?
Oh, not at all. Happy to do so.
And can you explain to the board how your deliveries operate, both in terms of the type of trucks that you get deliveries, when they come and how frequent they are, and how long they are on the property?
Okay, so our deliveries start anytime from 6 p.m. through the night to 5:30 a.m. Our delivery team, our driver, has a key to our stores. They deliver by, and it really depends on what the site can handle. It could be a tractor trailer or it could be a box truck. And they're there for 30 minutes, they unload, and they leave. Those occur daily.
There you go.
They come daily?
Daily.
And what type of truck again did you say?
It just depends on what the site can hold, but we have flexibility on a box truck, so a small truck.
It's not a 65-foot tractor trailer.
It could be, but it typically isn't anymore. The sites are just not big enough.
Now, in terms of your employment, how many employees do you have?
Between 20 and 25 per store.
And how many are there at your maximum peak shift?
So we have 3 shifts, and in each shift is 6 to 8 people.
And do you handle your trash and recycling internally? In terms of how you separate that and you follow all the recycling requirements?
Absolutely.
And how about your trash and recycling pickup? Do you control that?
So it's either, and I don't know what the lease says, Eric, I'm sorry. It's either we're going to control it by getting our own firm to come get it 2 or 3 times a week, or landlord's doing it, and I don't recall, I'm sorry. It's in the lease, and there's a lot of leases. There's, either we will contract it as a company, as Starbucks, or the landlord will do it. I just don't recall what the lease says.
And just in terms of your food preparation, and is there any like cooking that occurs? You don't have fryers
None.
or anything like that?
None.
So you do have like a microwave?
It's warming, it's a convection oven.
And finally, do you have any overnight parking? Do trucks?
No. No.
All right. And I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that's all my direct questions, and certainly sure the board will have more.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be some questions. Members of the board, please.
You mentioned, I think you asked the question about why couldn't you shut the lights off early if you're closing earlier? I didn't hear your response.
Our lights are on timers, so as the evening progresses, we close the store, the lights go off.
I thought I read somewhere that The lights were going to be on till like 2 a.m.
Only, there's security lights around the building, but the store lights will close, will turn off.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Kyle, how many Starbucks are there with a drive-through versus without?
Well, it depends where you're talking.
How about here in this New Jersey central or New Jersey area?
Yeah, so most of our non-drive-throughs were early opening stores, meaning first to the market 15, 20 years ago, and they were aligned with New Jersey Transit stops. So as an example, if there's a train in Summit, we have a store that's in Summit that's not a drive-through. So those early stores that we opened were not drive-throughs because they were associated with New Jersey Transit.
How many
So
of
I
your
don't know a
stores
number.
are drive-through versus no drive-through?
We're moving, it really depends on the area, but we're
Pick an area.
mostly drive-through.
Mostly drive-through?
Yes.
In any area?
I'm sorry?
In any area?
Mostly. Again, those early stores are cafes. We didn't start drive-throughs for probably 15 years into our business or so.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, please.
And I'm not quoting you, but you said you like this location because it could accommodate a very long line. What is a very long line? How many cars is in a very long line?
11.
11. So this layout can accommodate 11 cars in the line.
I believe so. I think it might be more than 11.
That's important.
Yeah.
Do you know the answer?
Well, we'll see that.
Our site plan engineer actually has it spec'd out, so, you know, he's
Yeah.
put the cars on it. He has a much more accurate number.
You also said, again, not really quoting, but you said it's a new mode of business for Starbucks. Can you speak to the location that's just further down 22 in Greenbrook?
Yes.
Do you manage that site?
I did that site. I don't work it, but yes.
So does that have what you call a very long line?
No.
And what happens when you have a site like that that doesn't have a very long line? What type of operational challenges are you faced with?
So that's a great question, because what we're doing in Starbucks internally is, and some of these things are not actually anything that the customer can see. So what we do is actually count steps, how many steps it takes to go from the oven to the window. So what we're doing is moving all of our equipment in our stores to get closer to the window to reduce the number of steps. We are constantly engineering new ways to quicken our process. As another example, we're issuing gravity-fed ice. So we typically, in stores that are older, that haven't been remodeled for the new ice, we'd have to go pick up a bucket, walk to the white ice bin, scoop the ice, walk back, and dump the ice. So you see, that's kind of like all that time and effort where it could be making drinks. So now we're putting in our stores gravity-fed ice. We're putting in faster coffee machines. So everything that we're doing since the pandemic, because that really heightened our awareness, is to quicken the pace. We're really working on it really hard.
And how has that worked out, would you say, for that Greenbrook location?
So that's gone under a renovation, and not everything is in that store, so we're working as hard as we can. I don't know the details of if line's too long or not long.
Will you be adding lanes to that location?
No, we can't.
What happens if Bridgewater, this location, if this gets approved and you end up with more than 11 cars in the lane, like you do in Greenbrook? You know, I'm not testifying, but of course I've seen it, as anybody who's driven by there at your peak time, that traffic gets pretty out of control, and it has spilled out onto some of the 22,
Right.
onto the other roads. What's the process? What's the emergency, hit the stop button,
shut it down, move cars, call security? What is the process if you get, let's say, and again, we'll wait for the accurate testimony on how many, but if we're saying 11, let's say 25, let's say we triple it or double it. What's the process? How are you going to handle that?
So this site is about 3 times the size of Greenbrook. We're going to bigger sites, and that's how you solve for it, because then we get to queue on site and we don't disturb the outside roads. This is an acre. That is enormous. So, you know, as we learn things through the pandemic, we learn to get bigger sites and better circulation. So Greenbrook, you know, if it opened in 2019, it was conceived in 2016. So you see, like, we just need to catch up and put all the new innovative, you know, equipment in the store.
Does Greenbrook have outdoor seating?
I don't know. I haven't been there in a bit.
Do you have any locations that you worked on that you can talk about that have had outdoor seatings and have this much asphalt with 3 lanes and a Y and all this? Do you have any locations that have that much?
The only other one I can think of is Chesterbrook. It's got an enormous line, and I bet outdoor seating. Chester, sorry.
That's the one in the shopping center. Yeah, I know what you're talking
You're welcome.
Can I ask you a question? We were talking about number of employees, and you have 3 shifts, and you said it was going to be about 25 employees at this location. Would Greenbrook have the same number and the same setup, even though they're smaller?
They should.
Then why, if the Bridgewater one would be a lot bigger and busier, wouldn't you have more per shift to move people quicker?
You know, if we need it, we'll hire. I don't control any of that. We just have kind of this standard that we start with, 20 to 25, and grow from there.
So if they ended up a lot busier a year down the road than you expected, you would have more employees
we
than
could.
to move people quick?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're going to have a monument sign, and the required distance is 25 feet. You've suggested 8 feet. How critical is that to the business, that it be only 8 feet?
So 22 is a fast road, so we'd like that sign out there so that people get used to seeing it and want to turn and recognize us.
We really don't want Bridgewater to look like a lot of other towns with all of these signs that are 25 feet tall and wide and lit up. So it's not really something that we're happy to see, but we'll go through with the application and we'll see where we wind up. But thank you.
Are you opening new locations without drive-throughs?
Mm-hmm.
And is it the location, is it the particular location that's the most attractive part of this property, or is it the fact that you can add a drive-through to it? Would it still be as attractive without a drive-through?
Absolutely not. If we do a cafe, it's usually in a mall. In, you know, other situations where the drive-through isn't possible. But this is a commuter road, and then that's the whole reason for the drive-through.
But would you still move forward with this project without a drive-through?
We would not.
All right, Ms. Kyle, I have a couple questions, picking up where Mr. Fresco left off. I'm kind of a blunt guy, and I'm just going to say it. You know, Starbucks is a juggernaut, probably on track to be $1 trillion company. It's astounding what they've done. It's amazing. It makes me proud to be an American. But at the same rate, you're growing incredibly fast. And safety is everything for this board. You know, how we handle safety is everything for this board. And I'll say it again, safety is everything for this board. So we want to be a good partner with you, and we want to make sure you succeed and you eventually go on to be that $1 trillion corporation. But the one thing that makes me nervous, and frankly, your traffic engineer, your applicant is hired, makes me nervous. Mr. Dean, he's been in front of this board, he's been in front of the planning board, he's been wrong. What happens when your traffic engineer gives testimony and we have the 12th car or the 13th car or the 25th car ends up on Route 22 because it's happening at the Dunkin' Donuts right up the road about a mile. At the Somerville property, we had nothing to do with that, unfortunately. What does Starbucks do when your growth, and you guys have a long-established growth pattern since the 90s, it's probably top of the S&P 500. What happens when you outgrow the 11 cars or 12 cars, whatever that number is? What does corporate Starbucks do in this location to relieve the safety issue they've created on Route 22 East?
So there's additional levelers that we pull.
Can you say that again, levelers?
Additional levers that we pull.
Okay.
So we talked about the inside changes. Some of the outside changes that we do is, I don't know if you've ever seen like those handheld, like Chick-fil-A.
Absolutely, yeah. I have 3 daughters, 3 teenage daughters, so I know it well.
Okay, so Chick-fil-A has a handheld ordering mechanism, is what I'll call it. We have the same. So we go out and we take orders, and so we get them into the queue, into the ordering method quicker. So that really, really helps.
Is there something that you would like to stipulate? If this Starbucks creates a traffic hazard and our zoning officer sees this, we have to call a timeout until you come and institute these new policies that alleviate, because like I said, the traffic engineer you've chosen, he's been wrong. He's been wrong in, I Googled it today, he's been wrong in Hillsborough, he's been wrong in Wyckoff. He's been wrong in a million towns. And we have our own traffic engineer. We're going to refute a lot of what he says. But it makes me nervous. And as a board chairman, safety comes first.
Absolutely, us too.
So
Absolutely.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I understand what it is, so Ms. Kyle, are there operational standards? Like if I see let's make up a number, 15th car in queue, I will automatically have a person with what I call the Chick-fil-A system, go out to accommodate that and to address circulation so there is no issues relative to a queue that gets out of hand. Is that something that you could agree to with this board as a condition of an approval that you would institute as an operational?
So the answer is yes. However, we also want our partners to be safe too. So we are very sensitive to sending people out and saying, go and direct traffic. We'd rather them make drinks and get people through. That does not mean, though, that we won't do it.
Well, that's a great answer, but I'm telegraphing to you and more to your attorney.
Yeah.
Okay.
No matter what comes out of your traffic engineer's mouth, I'm inclined not to believe it, because I'm a big believer in past performance is indicative of future results, and he's been wrong about a million things, all right? So if we have assurances from Starbucks, and we're gonna have to codify it somehow, we're gonna have to write this up.
And that's, Mr. Chairman, where I was going in terms of preparing a condition that we can work through with Starbucks relative to operations. You have them for your stormwater management, you have operation manuals for maintenance and stuff like that.
It's the same risk.
Yeah.
It's a safety risk.
Right. Right, and I think what we're hearing, Ms. Kyle, is that something that we could work cooperatively with the board to provide the board with assurance that operationally, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that it is an efficient operation that does not impair safety.
Because we have no say. Once you're approved and up and running, we're out of the equation. We have no way to kind of come back and say, this didn't work, your traffic engineer was indeed wrong, and here we are, we've got a mess.
Well, you do have conditions, Mr. Chairman, and that's the reason you put the condition in.
We do, but those are hard to enforce.
Yeah, I understand.
And you know that, unless
Yeah,
you
no,
come
I
back
understand.
for another variance, you know better than anyone. It's tough to enforce. So that's where I'm at in this case, and we want to be good partners, and we're excited about having you in Bridgewater. We think it's wonderful, but we don't want to be like, and I hate to associate you with Dunkin' Donuts, but they have a traffic problem because of their drive-through, and I want to make sure that that doesn't harm the neighborhood.
With that, but thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Smith, assuming that this doesn't conclude tonight at the next hearing.
That's a good assumption, Mr. Oliver.
So at the next hearing, maybe, you can give some thought to what that operation would be?
I think we could work through some operational stipulations that we can provide to the board for their review to address the concerns, Mr. Chairman, you and the rest of the board raised.
All right, any other board questions?
I just have one question for you. In your, sure, it's Kulak, K-U-L-A-K, first name John. In the experience that you've had with these drive-up operations that Starbucks has been rolling out as part of the new store footprint, if you will, have you had occasion to shut down traffic when it gets too long? You know, like no more drive-through people can pull in?
We have done it.
Mhm.
We haven't, it's not a regular thing, though, because we're getting better and quicker.
Right.
Faster, more efficient. And that's where we spend 100% of our time in Seattle talking about.
No, I understand that. I'm just asking if as you have had the experience of these drive-throughs, if you've had occasion just to say, let's take a pause here.
We have.
And how do you do that?
We go outside and ask the next customer in the car to kindly come in and place their order.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Most people do that. I mean, it's not raining. Most people will park and come in if the line's too long, believe it or not.
No, I believe that.
Oh, I said, if it's raining, most people will park and come in.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, if it's raining and they're going to stay in line.
I understand what you're saying.
What I meant was if the line was too long, they would park and come in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, board professionals, questions?
So I know we're still, Rob, well, I'm sure we'll go into the access and all the details of the design, but first, can you talk about, obviously there's going to be a hotel next door and another restaurant. Typically, how much of your business is walk-up? Do you anticipate any customers coming from the hotel or from the other restaurant, or just walking up or biking up to the site in general?
From the hotel, hotels usually have, and I'm not familiar with the brand, but they sometimes have restaurants that serve breakfast, like the Courtyard Marriott that I'm staying in has a Starbucks there with coffee and food. So I'll have breakfast there. If they don't, we may get a few customers coming over, but it's not like a stream of people walking. And the restaurant opens probably later than we do. Our prime time is early morning.
I'll leave commentary for later. To move on, how do you how much of your ordering is done by an app on your phone versus just somebody saying their order through a speaker? Can you talk a little about how orders are typically placed? Is it app-based where you just pull up and say, I'm order number 62B and just drive past the window? Typically, how does that work?
About 60% of our customers order on their phone, and they walk in, and the rest are in the line.
So specific to the drive-through then, are the people that are driving in ordering on their phones? Or the drive-through is your typical talk to a speaker?
That's the talk through the speaker, yeah.
And then I know we haven't seen the details of the site plan, but the way the site plan's set up, there's a right-in driveway. It's essentially dedicated to the Starbucks, the way the plan's laid out. How important is that to your business model? Do you need to have a driveway into the site right in front of your building? Can it be routed somewhere else on the site?
Well, I think the convenience for customers coming off of 22 would matter to them. And then, coming right off of 22, making a right-hand turn into our site would be most important to them. Otherwise, you'd have to circulate the building to get into the drive-through.
Well, and again, I'm sure Rob will show the site plan, but there is another driveway further east that serves the restaurant and the hotel where you can get into the property as well. Do you think that having the driveway in front of the Starbucks building specifically versus somewhere else on the site makes a difference?
So you're talking about the the point of ingress from Route 22?
Yes.
Yeah, we'd like to have that.
Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
I have a couple questions, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Kyle, you had mentioned your hours of operation. Closing time was 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, 9 p.m. Sundays.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you would agree to a condition or a potential condition where you extinguish the lights shortly thereafter. My question is, you also had mentioned security lighting needing to stay on after hours. Can you just give us a little more information on what that entails, the security lights?
Just lights that are on the corner of the building?
So they're exterior?
Yes.
Or they're interior as
They're-
well?
They're exterior.
Exterior, and are they more dimly lit typically than the lights that are on when business is open?
Yes, oh, yes.
Okay.
I don't know much more than that, though.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
We'll hear more about that. I just wanted
Yeah.
from your perspective. What's that? BURR. Sure. So 20 to 25 employees operating at 3 shifts. 6 to 8 employees typically at a time. Where do they typically park on site? Are you going to have specific employee parking areas, or will it just be wherever they?
No, we usually ask our employees to park in the rear of the site so that we leave the primary parking for customers.
So in this case, would it be the double-stacked parking lot parallel
Yes.
to Morgan Lane?
Yes.
Further from the
Further
building
away.
itself?
Absolutely.
The deliveries and
Yes.
the loading operations, you mentioned typically that's overnight hours, anywhere from, I think, did you say 6 p.m. to 5:30? But you mentioned that will occur on a daily basis. Are deliveries once daily, or could there be a scenario where you have 3, 4, 5
no.
trucks overnight coming through?
One time.
One truck, either a box truck or something larger, but typically one delivery per day.
Correct.
And is it always
One.
daily, or could there be days where there's no deliveries?
In instances where it's more rural, it's not once a day. It's
Okay.
twice a week.
Okay. But
for
in
bigger
this-
deliveries.
On this site, you would envision
Yeah.
once a day.
Yeah, once.
We haven't really waded into the signage package, but early on, we got a summary of some of the variance relief that you're seeking, and there are a number related to signage, which we'll hear about. But just a general, I guess, from your perspective, from a corporate perspective, there are in excess of freestanding as well as facade signs being proposed. In your opinion, are they absolutely essential the way it's laid out right now from a corporate perspective? Is there any wiggle room there?
There is. So in essence, again, we want to provide direction on how to circulate the site. We want, safety is a huge concern for us as well. We'd like to say thank you sign at the end of the drive-through, but we do have flexibility.
Okay, very good. Mr. Chairman, I think that's all I had right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burr. Members of the public, you had a question. Come on up. If we could just get your name and address.
I am on Adamsville Road, and this is my first zoning board meeting. Hi.
And your name again?
And my name is Tina, neighbor.
You spell your last name?
I'm just going to go with neighbor today. I just would like to point out that I also have young children. I'm very concerned about the traffic congestion coming in, especially school buses go on 22, leaving Adamsville going on 22. So that's a concern for me. Also, I'd like the board to address how if the service time is 4 minutes and you're waiting in line, how is the board going to address that Starbucks is not going to be considering the state of New Jersey law for no idling for more than 3 minutes? And also, in Hillsborough, the drive-through Starbucks has many more than 10 cars. And that's a single lane highway, 206 versus multi-lane
Question for the traffic.
22. Okay. So, thank you very much. This was fun. Enjoyed it. And thanks for having us. We live here, and we appreciate you guys listening to us. If this continues to another day, I'm bringing more friends, by the way, just so you know.
Got it. Any other members of the public have questions on Ms. Kyle's testimony? All right, seeing none, back to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My next witness is Rob Michello. Mr. Michello, can you please come up and be sworn?
Raise your right hand.
Yes.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And your full name, please?
It's Robert Moscello, that's spelled Moschello, and my business address is 265 Main Street, Gladstone, New Jersey.
You've testified before this board before recently, correct?
I've appeared before this board and the planning board in Bridgewater Township.
All right, good to see you again, Mr. Michello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, do I need to fully qualify Mr. Michello, or will you stipulate to his expertise?
As long as his...
My license is in good standing with the state,
Yes, the board accepts him, and this is coming in as an architect or design layout expert?
Civil engineer.
Civil engineer, all right.
Excellent.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so, Mr. Michello, if you could provide the board with your background and association with this particular property, your experience in terms of property design, the development of the hotel and Blue Hands, and in general, your knowledge of the property.
Right, so we're going to get a little, just a little, before I get to my exhibits, a little bit of background. I've been involved with this property since 2018. We did the original site plan application that came in for the revised hotel layout on the rear of the property and the Goddard School that was going to be on this lot in the front of the property. So we worked on that application, we went through the approval process, and we were part of that design when it was approved then. We've since been involved with the property owner in looking at this front parcel and changing it into the Starbucks that you'll see before you this evening when we present that. And we've worked through, and we've been working through the details with them on that as well. So,
And you are then the site plan design engineer of record for this property.
yes, I am.
So,
Great. So without further ado, I have a number of exhibits I'll go through this evening and present to the board, and I'll put them up over there to start. I think I can do it with the laser pointer. I think we'll be fine.
And if you could just remember, people are watching at home on YouTube, so when you talk to an exhibit, maybe reference the exhibit, we have to mark it, and then kind of give a lay of the land where you're at in the exhibit, so people that don't have it maybe in front of them can kind of get an understanding. Try, yep. And we got to get you a handheld microphone.
So let's mark that first one A1, please.
A1 for the record, and it's entitled Neighborhood Aerial Exhibit, and it's dated February 27th, 2024.
Testing, testing.
Great.
Mr. Michello, would you give me that date on that plan again, please?
It's February 27th, 2024.
Thank you.
Give me a moment to move my paperwork.
Take your time.
What I want to start off with here is what I have is the 2021 state aerial, just to kind of give a reference to the property location and the surrounding neighborhood that is around the property site. So north being up on the plan, you've got Route 22 east and west, basically in an east and west direction. That's on the top of the plan sheet here. You can see the divided highway. To the west, you have Adamsville Road. That's shown here on the plan. To the south, down here at the bottom, you've got Union Avenue. Okay, and then you have Morgan Lane, which is just to the east of the site, which comes into Route 22. And then further to the east, you have Findurn Avenue. And then just off to the top of the page here, you got the 287 interchange. So the property itself, and Mr. Smith talked about this early on, that it actually was condoed out, and it's actually one lot now. But this is the original lot configuration that was part of the original property. It was actually 4 lots that were originally there, and it was total 6.7 .88 acres of total area. And that would have included these 4 individual lots, Lot 6, Lot 7.01, Lot 10, and Lot 11. But since then, it's been converted into a single lot, Lot 6.01, and into 3 condo units, which I'll show you on a later exhibit. But this is the outline of the property in yellow shown on the plan here. It is in your HIC, your highway interchange commercial zone, which basically runs from Adamsville Road along 22 East to past Morgan to Findurn Avenue. And it's comprised of our property plus some additional properties that front on 22. This is the former Dazed Insight to the west. You have the Mercedes-Benz dealership, and you have to our east car repair. I think it's a muffler, Meineke repair shop. And then to the south of the property, you've got existing residential uses that are on Stanford Drive, as well as single-family residential on Morgan Lane. So moving on to my next exhibit. And we'll call this A2 for the record, and this is entitled Aerial Exhibit A2, and it's also dated February 27th, 2024.
Would you also put today's date on both of those?
27-24, I marked it on both of them. What we're looking at here is just a zoomed-in version of that aerial plan, just to give reference to what's on the existing property today and some of the existing improvements that are there. This is, again, from the 2020-2021 state aerials, so it's a couple years old now in terms of the property, but nonetheless. So 22 is along the top of the plan here. The property is outlined in yellow. Again, this shows the older lot configuration, but again, the overall tract boundary excuse me, is outlined in yellow, and it's 6.788 acres. You have, coming off of Route 22, you have a right-in and right-out access from 22. That's the main access into the property that exists there today. You come in, and that serviced the existing restaurant pad site, which was the Houlihan's, which is now being changed over to the, Stone Tavern. And it's currently under renovations as we speak. And that's the existing building here. And then there's actually additional parking in the back of the site that was constructed, and the parking just basically dead ends right here. It was built at, again, with the intention of completing what was supposed to be the hotel at the time when the original Houlihan's was built, but that wasn't done in this back green grass area here. And then we have access that goes out to Morgan Lane. And that access out to Morgan Lane is actually, and you can kind of see it here, there's kind of a curve to it. It's actually a left turn only to Morgan Lane to go back to 22. And if you're coming off of 22 down Morgan Lane, it's a right turn in only. So it's a right only in and a left turn only out onto Morgan Lane. And that's existing, that's there today. And we'll talk more about that in the application in terms of that restriction and how that's going to remain that way. But that's what exists today out onto Morgan Lane. And then we have the existing lot in the front here, which is condo unit 3, as we talked about, which is about 1.5 acres of land. And this is the lot that was originally, I think, about 15, 20 years ago, there was an ice cream shop here. It actually had its own access. You could see it on the plan here from Route 22. There was an access drive here right about in the middle of the lot. And there was an access drive off of Morgan Lane as well into this property. It had its own access. It was not accessed, via the Houlihan site or the back driveway from Morgan Lane, because it was not part of that property originally, as Mr. Munn pointed out. He purchased this just a couple years ago, so it was not originally part of any of these improvements. So there were 2 driveway cuts that exist out there today. They're still there. Actually, I shouldn't say that. This driveway cut is still there. The driveway cut on 22 has actually been replaced with, when you see the plan, the new slip ramp or slip drive that comes in off of 22. When I show you the proposed plan, that's actually been that's been constructed already as part of the DOT permit that was issued for this site. And then also the construction of the hotel site, as Mr. Munn pointed out, the construction of the hotel site, as Mr. Munn pointed out, did get started. There was some excavation that occurred there. Still fencing was put up, things of that nature. But it's basically stalled at the moment until they get their building permits, from our understanding. But this construction was started on this back portion of the site here, and the DOT improvement was put in off of 22. So this will be labeled A3 for the record. Site plan rendering dated February 27th, 2024. So just to give a little context to the plan first before I get into the details of the application this evening. So to reorient, this plan's actually turned around. Route 22 is on the bottom of the plan for reference purposes. Morgan Lane is on the left side of the plan or the east side of the plan. And then the north arrow is facing this way, as you can see here, down towards the floor. We've actually just kind of grayed back or shaded the improvements associated with the hotel and the hula hands for the purposes of discussing the Starbucks this evening. But I do want to take a moment just to point out that, you know, here's our access off of 22, a right in, right out access. You come into the site, you've got the parking for the hula hands, or not the hula hands, the New Stone Tavern restaurant, and then behind that is the hotel site that you see here on the plan. That's faded back, but that's the 121 room hotel and associated parking and access around that area of the hotel building. And that was the proposal that was approved back in 2019. Yeah, so just to point that out, yes, there's some existing parking spaces back here that we're going to remain. We need to do some trenching through the parking lot, so there's some different shades of gray here, but generally speaking, the parking back here was going to remain. Now, to the point of, before I get into the Starbucks, we talked about the condo limit lines. There's 3 condos on the property, and there's a couple blue lines on here. You can see this blue line that goes across basically almost the middle of the page. That blue line separates the hotel condo, which is Unit 2, from the rest of the property, and then there's a blue line that goes down basically to the bottom of the page here, just to the right of the Starbucks. That condo line separates the Starbucks lot, which is condo Unit 3, from the restaurant lot, which is condo Unit 1. So basically, it's a large condo unit in the back, which is the hotel, Unit 2. Unit 1 is the lower right-hand side of the page here, which is the restaurant, and then Unit 3 is basically that remaining 1.5 acres of land that was that original Lot 7 that is now going to be the Starbucks location. So that's how the condo unit lines are split up on the property. And really, that just comes down to how the underlying condo uses are, but you have multiple access agreements in the master deed that allow people to park across the site and access the site from different locations. So Starbucks doesn't just have to, Starbucks is not relegated to just coming in off of 22. You can access Starbucks from 22 at the other entrance, or even from a right turn in from Morgan Lane. So you have that ability to access the site from multiple locations. So in terms of tonight's application, we're talking about that condo unit 3, or the 1.5 acre parcel, which is representing the Starbucks. And I think to just talk about the access for a moment before I get into the layout of the building itself and the site-specific components of the Starbucks, I mentioned there were 3 access points into the property. We have the access off of 22, which is a right in and right out. That's the first access you'll see when you're traveling 22 east, okay? There's actually an identification sign at that location there for the existing site. And then we had gotten another access approved, which was essentially not quite centered on the condo unit 3 lot, which was a right in only off of 22 for access into the what was the Goddard property at the time, or the Goddard School. We had this access approved for that, and as I mentioned, it's part of it's been built already, but this access is approved for access into the Starbucks parcel. We also have internal access from the restaurant property, where you can drive across the front of the restaurant and access the Starbucks parcel. So if I come in off of 22, I can make a left and drive down the drive lane here to access the Starbucks parcel. Okay, I can come in off of 22 and make a right or a left to access the parcel. And if I happen to miss both this entrance and this entrance, I can make a right onto Morgan, I can come down Morgan Lane, and I can turn right into the property and come in the backside of the Starbucks into the lot as well. So there's 3 ways to access the property for purposes of getting into this site. And that holds true even if I wanted to go to the hotel, and if I missed this main entrance, I could come in off of 22 and drive around to the hotel. I'm not restricted based on the internal access agreements of the property to do that.
As you're pointing out the access points that you were describing, could you show us with each one of those if you were to get off of 22, access the property in any way, how you pull into the drive-up window?
Yeah, I'm getting to once you get into the site, how you going to circulate around the property. So we have the access points, as I mentioned, into the property. I can come in the back, the front, or even I can come in the side over here. The layout for the Starbucks parcel is generally the same as when we had the Goddard School. We had parking along Morgan Lane, a double-loaded parking lot, a double-loaded parking with a 24-foot drive lane, and we had parking in front of the Goddard School itself. Basically, what we did was we swapped out the Goddard School for the Starbucks. Certainly, the Starbucks building is much smaller. The Goddard was about 10,000 square feet in size. Starbucks is only 2,400 and actually 69 square feet. We say 2,466, but we mistyped the 6. So it's 2,469 square feet, single-story building, much smaller than the Goddard School. It's also a lot shorter. The Goddard was much larger here. This one's much shorter, and because it's shorter, that gives us the ability to provide the room for the drive-through lanes. So the idea was the building's generally located in the same place. The setbacks from 22, and I'll get into all the variances later on, are generally similar in terms of the building setbacks, both from 22 and Morgan Lane, but the building is, of course, a lot smaller. Around the building is a patio area. Outside the building, there is outdoor seating, both covered and uncovered. You'll see that on the architecturals and the renderings. But the main entrance basically faces Route 22. The drive-through is on the east side of the building. On the rear of the building, there's an employee exit entrance that's going to be used to access the trash area. And then there's also another door on the western side of the building for access to the patio area. So when I come in off of 22, whether I come in at the first entrance, the first 22 entrance, or I come in off the second 22 entrance, the drive-through is set up with, and this is what Lizette was talking about in terms of this Y configuration. So you have basically 2 lanes that come in. There's a lane closest to the building, and then a second lane. They're both 12-foot wide. There's an island down the middle of this double lane that divides it. And when you get to the tip here, you merge together into one lane. Once you merge, the order board or menu board is in the back of the property here. You have a overhead menu board side menu board with a display board with the microphone where you place your order. And then you would wait and queue around the turn till you get to the side of the building where you'd pick up your order. Once you pick up your order, you're going to drive another 30, 40 feet to the road here, where you would then turn, and depending on which way you want to exit the property, you could make a right-hand turn and go down this way to the back, and then make your left-hand turn out of Morgan and go down to 22. You can also make a left-hand turn and go back across the front and go back out to 22 that way. So you have the option of going either way. Depending on how people will, depending on their own preferences on where they want to merge back on, they may go out to Morgan or they may go back out to 22, but they have the option of either one. In terms of the size of the drive-through and the stacking, because there were some questions about how many cars can fit in this Y configuration drive-through that we have here. And basically, when you start measuring from the pickup window on the side of the building, and I'm going to exclude the distance to the stop bar because that's the car that's going to be leaving. I'm not going to count that once they leave. From this pickup window on the side of the building, around the back, and through the double-stacked lanes, depending on the size of the vehicles, you can have anywhere between 17 and 20 cars in that queue in total. If you got some bigger vehicles, it's closer to 17. Some smaller compacts, you'll get 20 into that stacking. Okay, and that's measured from when you enter the drive-through lanes here to the drive-through window on the building, which is a nice long U-shaped route to get to that drive-through. And because, as was mentioned, we have an acre and a half of land here that gives us the opportunity to have this longer drive-through on the property. You're also going to notice there's another lane here that goes around that drive-through. We call that the bypass lane. It's just a third lane that, for a couple things. Number one, it's for access to the trash enclosure in the back here for the Starbucks. So, if coming out of the back of the building here, there's a sidewalk that goes across the drive aisles and accesses the trash enclosure in the back here. That's of course, for the trash for the building. We have what we call a bypass lane that can access that trash enclosure, plus allow, if someone's waiting in line here and they decide that they don't want to place their order after waiting in line, they can pull out into the bypass lane and leave. Also, too, that gives the folks at Starbucks the opportunity where if someone does place a very large order at the kiosk or the menu board, they could tell them to, instead of waiting in line, they may want to pull out and go park their car and be able to wait and come in and pick up that order, as opposed to waiting in the drive-through lane, which could hold up other people from placing their order as well. So that gives them the opportunity to pull out and do that, and have that flexibility with the bypass lane.
Let me ask you just really quickly in reference to that. So when you come out, you receive your order, you continue down toward 22, you got your beverage, you are either going to make a right and then circle back to Morgan, or can you make a left and then another left and take that bypass to exit back out? Like if somebody says, doesn't make a right, can you make a left and use that as a lane?
Yes. So what you're saying, if I understand this correctly, so I'm here, I got my drink, coffee, whatever it is I'm drinking, and I get to this stop bar, and I can make a left. I can come across the front here, and yes, I can go through the bypass lane. It's a bypass lane. Go back out here, and then make a right, and then go make a left and go back out onto Morgan Lane. Yes, you could do that. It's a free lane of travel, correct. But they can also, as I mentioned before, continue along the front and go back out to 22 as well. So there's multiple options for circulation on the property around the building. You're not limited to just one way in and one way out in this particular.
And you exit on the north side of the property in that center entry point, or you can only enter there?
This slip ramp here, this slip ramp is enter only from 22.
Thank you.
And that was part of the DOT permit that we got for it originally, was it's enter only.
One lane.
One lane. It's actually 18 feet wide, but it's really only one lane. It's designed to be one lane. So we have a 12-foot lane plus a striped area, just so you have a little bit of extra maneuverability, but it is just one lane. And we looked at it as being that secondary means of entry, even when we were doing for the Goddard School. If someone were to miss that first entrance on 22, they have the second one to come in, and they'll see it. And I think there was a question about the signage. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the main entry sign is right here on the plan, just to the west of that entry drive. And this is where we were asking for the variance for the setback, because if we put it 25 feet back, it's going to be set pretty far back from the right-of-way. And you want to be able to see that sign as you come down 22 and get closer to this entrance.
How high is it?
It's not very high at all. It's actually only a couple feet high. I have the detail on my plan here. If you just give me a second, I will show that to you. But it's not a pylon sign that you would think that would be really tall. It's only 6 foot high off the ground.
Thank you.
Yep.
But I have a question. If you are accessing the property from, I guess, the hotel side or the restaurant side, you come in through the entrance on Route 22, and then you go across to the left, and then you go into the Starbucks property. Are you able to go straight across, like in front of the building, or are you forced to go toward the back?
No, so if I come in from 22, I get to this, I'll call it a four-way intersection, but it's really a three-way to a certain extent. I can make a left-hand turn and drive across the entire frontage of the property. I'm not restricted by any one-way traffic or anything like that.
Okay, so theoretically, if the drive-through lane backs up, you could have people coming in on both sides toward the drive-through, the start of it?
In theory, if the drive-through lane were to be completely full to this point right here, okay, you could have cars that would basically stack inside the property, inside the site here. Now, if someone comes in off of 22 and they see this line backed up, they can come in off of 22 here. They could loop around the entire property internally and get online for the drive-through. They would have that ability to do that. But they can also just pull into one of the parking spaces and go into the building at that point. But we have the ability that because of the way this is aligned or designed, you could have a little bit of spillover into the parking lot, and it would not be spilling directly onto Route 22. I think there was a mention of the Dunkin' Donuts that was just down the road that actually is really close to 22, and the drive-thru is close to 22. So you don't have that ability to stack vehicles like you do here internal to the site. We would think and hope that if I'm a customer coming off of 22, I get to this stop bar, and I look to my right, and this driveway, this drive-thru is completely full. To that point, I see there's going to be 20 cars in there. I'm going to go park my car and go in and get my drink, or come back at another time.
You haven't met my 17-year-old driver who gets Starbucks every morning. But, all kidding aside, I disagree with you, and I'm sure we're going to have dueling traffic engineers put that on the record, and you're not a traffic expert.
That's correct. I'm just talking about circulation internally, so I will defer to a traffic expert.
Thank you.
But I do have a 17-year-old daughter who does the same thing.
Absolutely, and if it's raining, she's not getting out of the car. And she's going to sit there, and she's probably going to sit on Route 22. So that's the danger, and that's the safety issue that I brought up.
Again, and as we look at it, that's why we like the fact that we have this large area here to stack cars and have that ability to stack 20 cars on the property. And again, that's from an operational perspective. That's why we designed it the way we did. I understand your point of view about, okay, what happens if we get 30 cars? From that regard.
And that's the issue, and you keep going back to it. What if? How do we come back and fix it if there's a problem? Listen, I want a Starbucks. I think everybody in the room loves Starbucks. But what happens if that 21st car causes an accident on Route 22 East, where cars regularly go 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, and 3 pedestrians were killed in the last 5 years? So that's something you have to ask yourself, and we can make jokes all you want. That's life and death.
And I understand completely, and that's why we have this buffer here, or this ramp, before you get to the actual internal circulation. And I understand your concerns about that, but it gives us that extra buffer, if you will, where cars are going to come here and actually come to a stop before they come into the site, as opposed to a drive-through that may just start on the highway itself.
So, I'm not a designer, so what about an electronic gate that once you hit the maximum capacity for cars in the lane, that you just drop a gate and people have to go somewhere else, park on the side or whatever?
I mean, I've not thought of that, but
Suggestion
yeah.
we'll think about.
Okay.
Because I've never seen it before, but
maybe there's a way.
where that,
Maybe there's a way to put a sign, a light that closes the drive-through or something, a red light or something.
Red and green light that says go, stop, whatever.
Drive-through closed. I mean, we can certainly look into something.
It's something to think about.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be back, so trust me.
All right.
So, I have a question. So, after the 17 to 20 cars in the drive-through queue, how many cars can fit, I would say, from the entrance on Route 22 to the start of the drive-through?
This is just anecdotally, because I haven't measured it, but
Sure.
This is about the distance from the edge. I'm going to measure from the curb line or the edge of the traveled way of 22, not the shoulder itself, because you could theoretically have people parked in the shoulder, but I'm not going to measure that. Just this distance here is about 60, 70 feet, so you can get 3, maybe 4 cars, depending on the size of the vehicles, in this area here. And if you were to have that circuitous turn to go into the drive-through, let's say they decided to block the drive lane for all intensive purposes, you could probably get another 2 to 3 cars across here. So I'll say 5 to 7 cars, roughly, that would back up this entire lane before you actually get out to 22. So 17 to 20 in the queue, plus another 5 to 7 before you get to 22.
Thank you.
Assuming they do this and go out that way and don't stack into the site.
And can you just address the on-site parking?
Yeah, so we were talking about circulation, but again, based on the size of the Starbucks, it requires 24 parking spaces. For this particular site, based on the layout, we have 34 spaces available to the Starbucks to park. Again, there's 7 across the front of the building. 2 of those are ADA accessible. There are 3 5-minute parking spaces that were talked about previously, where people can pull in, run in, pick up their drink, pull out and go. 2 regular spaces in the front here, and then the rest are on the side. There's 16 parallel to Morgan, and then 11 on the other side of the drive lane, for 27 spaces that are on the east side of the plan here for patrons to park and come into the building.
Are you proposing any EV spaces?
Actually, we are going to have at least 1 EV charger on the site. It wasn't on the site plans. There was an EV charger on the hotel building, and there was an EV charger on the Goddard plan, but for whatever reason, it didn't get carried through to the Starbucks plan. So under the requirement for this parking lot that's being modified, you need to have one EV charger for the site for right now. So we'll have that shown on the plan as it's a requirement of the state code to have that. And then if there's more in the future, that would get added by Starbucks. So in terms of parking, there's additional available parking spaces beyond what the requirement is for the building itself, which is 20 spaces. And then there's also the overall site, just to look at some of the overall parking numbers on the site, just for reference purposes. You had the site itself only required, just to get the number right here, 246 parking spaces. That is for the hotel, the restaurant, and for what the Starbucks use would be. And there's going to be a total of 293 spaces. So the site's overparked by a certain number of spaces, which if there's any spillover for parking, cars could park back here to get to the Starbucks as well, if there's the need for it. But we don't anticipate that given the amount of parking that the building requires based on the design standards. I know there was a question in one of the review letters, I think it might have been Mr. Fishinger's letter, about pedestrian access to the hotel. And what we didn't realize that when we laid it out, that we have this back sidewalk here to the trash enclosure, and then thinking about the hotel use, where people who are staying at the hotel may want to go to Starbucks to get a drink or get their coffee. So what we're going to look to do is provide a connecting sidewalk from the back here to the sidewalk that's around the hotel, so you'll be able to walk to the Starbucks should you wish to go there. We didn't see the need to connect the restaurant to the Starbucks. Again, from a use perspective, that they usually, if you're at the restaurant, you're not usually going to the Starbucks. So those are separate. But from the Starbucks to the hotel, we want to get that connectivity that was mentioned in the letter. So we felt that'd be good to add that sidewalk to the plan. And back here is where it would logically connect to the sidewalk for the hotel building.
Is that trash enclosure, is that the 8-foot fence trash enclosure?
No, that trash enclosure only has a 6-foot high fence. The 8-foot fence, which actually is not part of this application, it's where am I?
Someone said earlier, I believe Mr. Smith said that they're sharing, so I'm confused about what happened.
Yeah, there's actually, the trash enclosure for the hotel was originally back here. And because there was some concern from the residents about the trash being back here, we moved it over to here. But this fence around this trash enclosure is not 8 foot high. This is only a 6-foot high fence. The 8-foot high fence is on top of the retaining wall on the back here to screen the parking area for the hotel. And there's actually an 8-foot high fence along the rear property line as well. So that's what that fence was part of. It wasn't part of the Starbucks. But it's on the plans because it's part of the site plan.
The existing fence along that property is going to be removed based on what you have on the drawing, right?
The existing fence back here is...
Along this Starbucks unit, there is an existing fence that is shown as being removed.
Yeah, there's an existing chain fence. It's not chain link. I think it might be wood fence along here that's actually going to be removed. It's overgrown with vegetation. That's going to be taken out. And we're going to be putting landscape planting across here to provide some enhancement of that area and take that overgrown fence down. That's no longer needed there. Because originally that fence was put up because this was a separate parcel owned by separate people. That's why the fence was there.
I have a question.
Landscaping, you want to just go ahead and describe, because this also shows your landscape plan, correct?
Mr. Smith, if we could take a break, because landscaping's a big issue for this board, and we'll talk about it more in depth, and we can spend the proper time on it. So let's take a break. It's 9:02. Let's reconvene at 9:15, if that's all right. Thank you.
right, it's 9:17. We're going to reconvene. Roger, if we could get a roll call, please. Here.
Here.
Yep.
Here.
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 All right. Mr. Smith, before we pick up with Mr. Michello, I wanted to clean up one issue we had on a fire marshal letter from February 20th, 2024. And I just want to make sure that you have that in your possession.
Yes, we do.
And you agree to everything that he said.
Fire marshal,
Yeah.
that was the
Is
active
this
style.
okay, it's working. Yes, the fire marshal letter talked about a couple different items. One was access around the building. We, based on the layout, we feel that because of the double lane here and the backside here, we have a full 24-foot access around the building. Now, I wouldn't think the fire truck would drive down the drive-through lane, but he can certainly go back out this way.
Well, if you have 22 cars in your drive-through lane, he's not driving through your drive-through lane.
In theory, yes, but then if there's 22 cars through there, hopefully the building's not in an issue where we need to get the fire truck that close to the building.
So it sounds like you accept this letter and you have no problem with it and you understand what they've asked of you?
Yes, there's also a Knox, I think there was a Knox.
Knox box, and
there.
yeah,
There
that's
was one-
standard.
There was one comment about, and I'll have to clarify this with Mr. Scalera because he's talked about a fire department connection, but there's no sprinkler on this building. So he wanted a fire department connection on Morgan, but it's not sprinklered because I guess, from a design perspective.
So why don't we just asterisk this and you're going to come back to it
I
at the March 12th meeting? We'll
and I
talk
can
about it a little
confirm
bit
that
more.
with Mr. Scalera.
So,
And we'll have that discussion.
Perfect. Now that I've put that on the record, conferring with a few of the board members, actually most of the board members, this drive-through is an issue for many of the members, and obviously safety, we all echo those sentiments. I'm just wondering, and Mr. Michello, you can answer this however you please. I'm curious, whenever this was drawn up a year ago, 6 months ago, or 5 years ago, I'm wondering, did you draw up this rendering, this plan, based off of potentially utilizing some of the Goddard School Planning Board 2019 approvals? And now that they're off the table, I'm wondering if there's a way that you could be more creative and fit more cars. And the genesis of this, for me, is if you look at Starbucks as an entity for a moment, and their growth, they IPO'd in the early 90s. They've essentially had 35% EBITDA growth, 15% bottom line growth, which is, like I said, it's a juggernaut. I'm not saying that revenue growth translates to traffic growth, and I'm sure that would be an interesting study, but at some point, this company is growing so fast and so immensely. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I just don't think these cars all fit. You are in the prime location, and we understand why you want to be there. I'm curious if you would like to take, between this meeting and March 12th, to maybe take another stab at this, now that you know that many board members are concerned. And no is an acceptable answer if you want to pursue and go forward with your existing rendering. But I'm just curious, if you take the 2019 Planning Board approvals for the Goddard School, just take them out. You're a creative firm. You guys design wonderful things from schools to stadiums. I think you could do better.
I can tell you one thing, Mr. Chairman, that I do know, and I'm sure Mr. Michello will agree. If we made these types of modifications, it may create new variances. Because I think one thing, as I'm looking at it, is just one obvious is if the closer you put the building to Morgan Lane, the greater capacity you're going to get in your drive-through. But that's going to create a variance. So I'm just letting the board know that we'll certainly look at it, but in looking at it,
I'm a big believer that when you have talented people in the room, good things happen. You have Gladstone Design. They're talented people.
Oh, yeah.
You've got the best engineers. You've got a talented attorney. I think good things can happen here. Now, you certainly can take the next 40 minutes and talk about this plan all you want, but like I said, I just want to transmit to you that the board is concerned about it.
No, we hear you loud and clear. We hear the rest of the board. We understand this. This is why we're probably going to be at least 2+ hearings as we go through this and the plan evolves.
All right, I just wanted to put that on the record.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr.
understood that. Absolutely. So then, if I may, then, Mr. Michello, you still under oath?
Yes.
All right, we are back on the record. And we were just beginning your discussion regarding the landscaping plan. And again, given the hour, we will have Mr. Michelle complete his direct testimony to the extent possible, and then he will continue at the next meeting.
Perfect.
To just talk about the landscaping on the property, and the numbers that I'm going to talk about here are holistic for the entire site. We didn't break the landscaping down separately for the Starbucks because when we looked at the waivers and the way the rules were applied, the landscaping was for the entire property. So I want to just go through some of the I'll go through some of the numbers in a moment, but just to describe the on-site landscaping that's here for the property, and some of this was carried forward from the prior application because it was part of the design when we met with the prior planner and went through the landscaping. A lot of these features were what was talked about in terms of the screening. And there's a couple things here that I want to point out for the landscaping. And this goes back to some of the existing landscaping first that's in front of the hula hands. There is an existing stormwater basin that's in front of the hula hands or the Stone Point Tavern.
Yes.
And that basin had actually two pretty thick hedgerows that went around it. And what we look to do, and it's not shown on this plan here, but there's a hedgerow that's in between these street trees that we proposed here. We wanted to continue that hedgerow with this double row of shrubs all the way around, all along the frontage of Route 22, to continue that look along 22. And then we were going to turn that look and bring it all the way down Morgan Lane. And that actually continued on the other side of the entry-exit drive to the back of the property. So that double row of shrub massing was something that was started on the restaurant property, and we continued it all the way around the front of the site on the site. And then also, we incorporated a third row of shrubs right up against the parking lot as well that was requested. That's also because there's a row of shrubs on this portion of the site, too, in front of the existing parking spaces. We continued that along the frontage of the building and along Morgan Lane as well, basically creating almost a triple row of shrub massing, broken up only by the stormwater facilities in the front of the site. On top of that, we also have shrub massing around the perimeter of the building itself to break up the patio area from the drive-through and the back of the building as well from the drive-through lanes. Also, to separate the drive-through from the parking area, we have some shrub massing there. As well as around the back portion of the site. And then that shrub massing and evergreen plantings continue around the rest of the property for the hotel and for the restaurant site. All told, in terms of the numbers that are required per your ordinance, again, this was based on an overall site number. The required number of trees that are required on the site were 110 based on the amount of disturbed area. We only have 25 that complied for that requirement. So that we were asking for a waiver on from 110 trees that were required, and we only had 25. Those are just regular shade trees that were dispersed throughout the site. And the 110 were required and 25 were proposed. The number of parking lot trees that were required inside of the parking lot, those are trees that would be adjacent to the parking lots themselves, or parking lot shade trees. Your ordinance required 29, and we had 29 to comply with that requirement. In terms of what we'll call the transitional buffer plantings, and this is not related to Starbucks itself. This was related to the rear portion of the site, where you butt up against a residential property line. Your ordinance required 188 plants, and we had 235, so we were in excess of that requirement. In terms of the amount of shrubs that were required for impervious area, this is the number of shrubs that were required based on the square footage of impervious area on the site. And again, this is holistic to the entire site. 135 shrubs were required. Here we had 478 shrubs. So we were in great excess of that number. And there's a reason for that in a moment, because the foundation shrub requirements, so this is the plantings of foundation plantings around the building foundations themselves. Your ordinance requires 455 shrubs, and we certainly could not accommodate that based on the buildings and the site layout that you have. We had 280 shrubs provided. So what we ended up doing in terms of those numbers originally was we added more shrubs in other places throughout the site to get those double and triple rows of plantings around the property to make up for what we couldn't do around the buildings, but it was still a waiver under your ordinance requirements. Then there was the requirements for street trees. This was trees measured along Route 22 and Morgan Lane. And your ordinance required 23, and we provided 23. So we were in compliance with the street trees. And then lastly, we had the Route 22 buffer requirements. Again, this was the buffering along 22 itself, 22 frontage, where we were required to have 187 shrubs. And we had 351 shrubs. So we were well in excess of that number along the 22 buffer requirements. So all told, there's actually over 1,200 shrubs on this project site between the massing along the right-of-ways around the parking lots themselves and along the rear portions of the site for the development.
And then in terms of the shrub, or the shrubbery that you have, both around the perimeter and the parking, is the shrub height designed to be like when your car is parked, that headlight?
The shrub heights vary, and they go anywhere from 18 to 24 to 30 to 36, depending on where they are on the site. The 30 to 36 ones are typically closer to the parking areas. The 18 to 24s are typically closer to the buildings. But again, that's a varying depending on the type of shrub. But yes, it does vary slightly.
And that would
you want taller ones by the cars, correct?
Mask the car headlights and on-site activity.
That is correct.
Okay. Then with regard to stormwater management,
one more. So before we jump off the landscaping. So in Ms. Doyle's letter, number 14, number 13, she says, plants along the highway in Morgan Lane are not in compliance. Let me finish, and I'll repeat it. Number 13 in Mr. Doyle's report says, landscaping, the plants along the highway in Morgan Lane are not compliant. The plants should be revised in full accordance with 26-193. One native species should be preferred. What's the story with that?
Yeah, I mean, we were proposing native species. I didn't get into the specific of the comment, but we were proposing native species. We can check it to make sure. I have no problem with that. But the point what she was looking for was when we had, and this goes back a couple of years now, and we actually had met with her about this, and we talked about wanting to match that shrub row that was along 22. So this was a double row. So we kind of agreed and said, all right, we're going to do a double row along the front here, but because we have the stormwater basins, we're going to add the third row along the drive aisle here. So essentially, you're still getting the 3 rows, but instead of doing it here, we added it here, so this way you had 2 levels of buffering. Along Morgan, it's a little bit tighter, so you have them a lot closer to each other, if you can see that. But that was the genesis of the comment. So that's why we designed it that way. And again, that was the purpose of it. If the intent is to try to squeeze a couple more in here, we could try to do that. I'm not saying we can't. Certainly want to work with the board on that.
Right. And just for clarity, maybe I'm missing it, but you're saying the total numbers that you're throwing out, those are for up here everywhere?
It's property-wide, correct? Yes, yes.
Are these going to be installed or planted when this is being built, or are you going to wait for the hotel?
Oh,
Are you going to plant all these things in here? Built?
Well, that has to be built with the hotel. It does.
Okay, so again, just to be clear, these totals, we're not going to see these totals until the hotel gets built. That is correct.
Yes.
Yes, I think there is. Is that a plug? Are these outlets live? There's outlet caps here.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Suzanne.
They're asking for outlet work.
Is there an outlet that she can plug into? Yeah, I'm looking at this. Looks like oh. Thank you. All right, so back on the record? We ready? Okay, so, Mr. Michella.
Stormwater.
Stormwater.
Unless there's any more questions about
Are there any more questions on landscape?
No, I do have one question about the landscaping materials and the screening. Because you're dependent on the construction of the hotel, and you're describing the property in its entirety and the shrub requirements and the screening requirements, when you go to the rear of the property, you're adjacent to a residential area.
That's correct.
And there is a fence which is in gross disrepair there.
Correct.
There's a lot of what I'll call trees that are deteriorating over time, and a necessity to provide some visual screen to the people who live behind the property. But what we're doing is, I think, or you're asking rather, for us to approve the entire design again?
No, again, and quite honestly, Mr. Kulek, I think your point is very well taken. When we come back in March, we're going to have a breakdown just for our site.
Fair enough. Yes, we can.
We need to break down just for our site, because I understand the confusion. Because we are dealing with the site-wide, and quite frankly, the hotel and the Houlihan's aren't before the board. So we will provide a breakdown specific to this unit.
And then, presuming then that the overall site plan, you're saying the part of it that's covered by the restaurant and the Stone Tavern and the hotel, you're relying on your past plans and your past approvals for that?
Correct.
I'm not sure, I need a little legal insight here, because when you came to this board with this new proposal, didn't you then say you're opening up the rest of the site and asking for the maximum relief possible for this property? Or did I misunderstand you?
No, so we had prior relief, variances that were granted associated with the Goddard School. That was part of the comprehensive plan. Mr. Aller and I had a discussion before the hearing, and I agree with his legal analysis, which is those variances aren't binding on this board. And therefore, as it relates to the variances that we may have gotten from the Goddard School, they're irrelevant. So we're starting with a clean slate here. However, the relief granted for the hotel and for the Houlihan's still stays in place, but we're not going to reference that. We're only going to focus on our site. The variances now will all be sui generis, to be Latin, but they'll all be with only this application.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm sorry if there's any confusion. So the Goddard School approvals are...
Understood. One last question with regard to circulation. Is there pedestrian access, so somebody who's in the Jiffy Lube who wants to run across the street, Morgan Lane, to get to Starbucks can do so? You're adjacent to a residential area. People strolling around in the evening want to walk down the various adjoining streets. How do they get into the Starbucks site, or are you trying to keep them out?
We don't want to keep customers out, but there is an existing sidewalk on Morgan Lane. It comes down from the north, comes down and actually stops at the intersection right here. We are proposing a sidewalk into the property, which connects into the hotel. Once they come in here, they could walk essentially into the parking lot area to get into the site. There's no internal sidewalk from this portion of the property into here, but they can certainly walk down the drive lane to get there. If they're at the Jiffy Lube across the street, they could walk down and come in the Morgan Lane entrance as well. I don't anticipate, with all the landscaping we have here, I don't think someone's going to try to come through that buffer line.
I just wanted to make sure there was at least a thought or a provision.
There's connectivity at this entrance point here. We would anticipate that people who would live to the south, not the north, they could bike here or they could walk here, and they have access to get into the property.
Right.
And we are actually providing, I forgot to mention this, some bike racks as well. So if someone wanted to bike in, they could park, they can put their bikes, or even if an employee wants to bike into the property, we have that ability for them to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're ready for stormwater.
There we go. So continue relative to stormwater.
Sure. So I'm going to go to my next exhibit for the record. I believe we're up to A4. And this is entitled Grading and Utility Exhibit, A4 for the record, dated February 27th, 2024. It's basically a colored version of our grading and utility plan that's in the site plan set. And really the purpose of this is just to talk for a few moments about the site utilities. Again, this is full public utilities, sewer, water, electric, telephone cable. It's all available in Morgan Lane or on 22. So the building will be serviced to pretty much with water and sewer from Morgan and gas from Morgan, and then electric will probably come off 22, but that could change as well once we meet with the utility companies. In terms of the stormwater management systems on the property, This site actually goes back to the late 90s, early 2000s when it was previously developed. There was actually 4 existing basins that were built on the property at the time. There was a basin along 22, and there were 3 basins, one along Morgan and then 2 along the back property line that were put in place at that time for what was going to be the development of the Houlihan's and the hotel site. The basins were built, but the hotel was never built. So when we came in 2019, we actually looked at the design, and in addition to retrofitting or modifying the back basins and adding water quality devices and attenuation for the hotel site for the stormwater management in the back, we actually included a new bioretention basin in the front of the site for what was the Goddard School at the time, but is now the Starbucks. And that bioretention basin is located in the front here. And we were also going to expand the existing basin along 22 to meet the water quality requirements of the ordinance, as well as to meet the attenuation requirements as well. This site, because it's in Metropolitan Plan and Area 1, does not have recharge associated with it, so there's no infiltration. Here it wasn't required, but attenuation and water quality is, and based upon the fact we have 5 basins are designed to treat the runoff, store it, and then discharge it. There's actually 2 discharge points, 3 actually, one in Morgan Lane, one in the upper right-hand corner of the site, and then the rest of the discharge goes into the storm drainage system that's in 22. That was part of the DOT application when we got the entrance approved.
Anything more to add on stormwater?
No.
Okay, then let's quickly touch base on lighting. Just describe the lighting. I believe we have a design waiver for the lighting intensity.
Yes, the lighting on the site is going to be LED-style lights. We're actually going to take down the existing lights that are in the Houlihan parking lot. I keep saying Houlihan, Stone Tavern parking lot. We're going to replace those with new LED-style lights. We also have proposed LED lights for the Starbucks as well as the hotel. And we are actually asking for a slight lighting level deviation. Your ordinance requires an average of 1.5 across the entire site. We're at 1.4, so we're slightly under the ordinance requirements. So we felt that waiver, given the fact that we're slightly under, we would ask for that waiver requirement as opposed to hitting the 1.5 right on the.
What's the unit we're referring for us laymen? So instead of 1.5?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's what they call foot candles. So the level of lighting across the site. It's the average light level across the site. So again, the ordinance requires 1.4.
So you're going to have less light than the ordinance?
Slightly under 1.4.
Oh, okay.
It would be, it's almost imperceptible to you know, a human. So slightly lower.
So in terms of then what we were talking about before, Mr. Chairman, relative to nighttime after we're closed, you are able to prepare a outline diagram that would show what will the lighting be like when we're closed, so that the board can see, you know, for the overnight hours that we're
right. So to
illuminated.
add to that, there was some talk about the lighting times. Yeah. So the hotel was actually approved for 24/7 lighting. So the lights that are associated with the hotel in the back here would be on 24/7. That was part of the prior approval. The lighting associated with the restaurant was actually, during the week, it was 12 a.m. or midnight, it would be turned off. And then on the weekends, it was 2 a.m. That's what was put on the record. It was supposed to be right after business hours closing. The Goddard School was different because it was a school. It would be turned off earlier in the evening. For the Starbucks, if it's 10 p.m., what we would do is turn off the parking lot lights around an hour after closing, 11 p.m. I mean, they would be off till the morning hours when they reopen again, typically a half hour to an hour before they open.
Security lights?
And security lights would just be on the building. There would be no parking lot lights turned on.
And I'm sorry, when did they go off?
The security lights on the building would remain on all night. But there would be no interior lights on the building turned on, no interior lights on when the business is closed.
When you were talking about the level of lighting at 1.4, you were talking about across the entire site?
Entire site when it's fully turned on, everything turned on at one time.
And I just have to go back to the point earlier where when you start quoting about the entire site, from a perspective of someone sitting in this chair, I'm asking, are you looking for relief for some other part of the project? and stealing it by getting it on this side of the project, or the opposite is true. And so I'm having trouble honoring the other approvals and waivers when they seem to be incorporated, at least in your language, as you describe the lighting for this site.
I could look to break out the lighting for the Starbucks, so we have a separate number associated with that.
Right, that'll be something that will be done in conjunction with the next hearing, where not only will we address the nighttime lighting level, but we'll address the specific lighting level for this unit.
I think as far as lighting goes, that was basically it in terms of the presentation on that.
Right, so are we ready to go to the variances?
We are.
All right, so, Mr. Michello, in terms of the relief that we are requesting tonight from this board, can you walk this board through each and every variance that we are requesting tonight?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. I'm gonna put up one more exhibit, and I might end up referring back to the other exhibits as well as I go through.
That would be A5?
This will be A5 for the record, Starbucks variance exhibit, also dated February 27th, 2024. So I'm actually going to, as I go through this list of variances, for those who want to follow along, I'm actually going in the order of what is in Ms. Doyle's letter starting on page 3 in terms of reference, just so you can follow along in terms of what the variances are. And again, some of them we've identified graphically on the exhibit here, A5. Others you can't identify on the exhibit, so I'll just talk to them as opposed to pointing them out. But I'll go through each of these and talk briefly about each one.
Before we get started, though, can you talk about, in general, the zoning requirements for this site in terms of setbacks, et cetera, that you show in blue on your exhibit?
Yeah, so just talking about the bulk setbacks for your HIC zone. And again, this is based on keeping in mind the overall tract boundary is how this is looked at in terms of the setbacks. You have what amounts to...
Wait, stop. The setbacks would apply to Unit 3, to this property as shown on this exhibit, correct?
As the corner of it would apply, yes.
Right.
So we can look at it specifically for Unit 3.
Look at it specifically for our site.
Because it really doesn't matter for the other
Correct.
ones. So for Unit 3, for the setbacks, you've got a front yard setback from Route 22, or the main highway, of 200 feet. So that's this blue dashed line you see here. So it's measured 200 feet off the right-of-way line with Route 22. And then you also, because you're a corner lot, you've got the front yard setback from Morgan Lane, which is 100 feet, which is this blue dashed line here. So it creates this angle point, or angle corner, if you will, where everything in front of these setback lines would not be allowed from a building perspective based on the current HIC ordinance. So you'd only be able to put a building theoretically back here within the setbacks that exist on this particular portion of the property, forgetting the other two lots that are there, which this was originally lot 7.01 in discussions. So those are the bulks for the for the setbacks.
Quick question. Was that considered to put the building within the envelope?
No, we did not look at putting the building within that 200-foot setback. No, it was not considered.
Why?
For a number of reasons based on layout, circulation around the building, and parking and access to that parking. It was not, putting the building all the way back here would have it so far away from the rest of the development area on the property. You really want to, when we looked at this, we wanted to generally center it on the property.
Thank you.
From an access and visual perspective.
So, please review the variances.
Yes. So we're going to start off. The first two are not any particular section, but this was discussed by Mr. Smith already. The restaurant use and the drive-through restaurant aspect of it. So I'm not going to list the sections for those, but we realize it's a D1 use variance for a restaurant use with a drive-through, and we're requesting that variance as part of this application. Moving on down the list. The next one is, and unfortunately in the letter, it just says departure and comment. It doesn't say if it's a variance or a waiver, but I've gone through and generally checked with the ordinance section. So some of these are waivers and some of them are variances. I'll note that as I go through them. So it's not in any particular, I'm going in her order of the letter. So there's going to be some variances and waivers. They're going to be mixed together here. So just bear with me as we go through that. So then moving on to the next one, which is going to be the improved lot coverage for the project. And again, this is based on the overall property. It's 60%, and we're at 60.5%.
And could you do the calculation for the March meeting relative to just the Unit 3 coverage?
It's already done on the plans. So on the plans, the Unit 3 coverage, and this was condo Unit 3, it's on my cover sheet, sheet 1 of 13. It's actually 50.6% is the lot coverage for the Starbucks lot. The overall property is 60.5%, which is slightly over the 60%. And I should note the prior variance, just for reference purposes, was at 60.8%. So I didn't mention this previously, but we did slightly reduce the impervious coverage from the prior application to this application. It's about 1,000 square feet reduction in coverage area for the current plan you see here in front of you. So that's a lot coverage variance, and that is actually from section 126-314.1.F9 for reference purposes. That's maximum permitted impervious coverage. Then we have a variance for what is the minimum building front yard setback, and that's from section 126-314.1F14, and this is for the building setback from Route 22, where 200 foot is required, that I pointed out here on the plan. That's the setback line. And we actually have a couple numbers I'm going to talk about here. There's a setback distance to what is the corner of the Starbucks building, which is 119.4 feet. That's the dimension you see on here. And then we also have a setback variance to what I'll call the corner of the overhead canopy or the roof of the outdoor seating area. That's a canopy overhang. That's 113.8 feet. So there's a setback to the canopy and a setback to the building. We listed both of them were listed here, so we're calling them out as such as a variance for that corner of the building. The next one is a variance from section 126-13.1.F.5, and this is for a variance setback from Morgan Lane. This is the 100-foot setback from Morgan Lane. So that's this 100-foot setback line that's shown here. So Morgan Lane, we are measuring actually, again, two numbers, but the main one here is the 96.3 feet. That's measured from the property line to the canopy of the drive-through. For the distance to the setback of the building. The actual building itself is actually set back 101.4 feet. So the actual building itself complies technically with the Morgan Lane setback of 100 feet, but the canopy itself is at 96.3 feet, which is a variance per the ordinance. The next one is the minimum parking setback. This is from section 126-171C. This is actually a design waiver in your ordinance. And this is the minimum parking setback from what is Route 22, where 100 foot is required. And we have, actually, it's 81.5 feet. The plan originally said, hold on a second here, 86.3, but it's actually 81.6. I'm sorry, the original plan said 83.1. And it's actually 81.6, and that's the corner of the parking space in the front left-hand corner of the property here, when measured from the edge of the parking space to the right-of-way of Route 22. It's 81.6 feet when measured to that distance. 81.5, I'm sorry.
So the planning document is inaccurate. It says 57.1.
The 57.1, I think, is an error because I think what Ms. Doyle was looking at was there was a shaded parking space over here by the Houlihan's. This was actually an existing parking space that was going to be repaved, and I think she might have construed that as a proposed parking space, which is not the case. So when you measure that distance, it's about 55 to 57 feet from the right-of-way line.
Now it's 80 what?
Now it's 81.6 feet, and that has been the case for this parking space on the lower left-hand corner here, the proposed. 81.6, and that's a waiver under the ordinance. So it's not 57, it's 81.6. Then the minimum parking setback from Morgan Lane, which is same section 126-171.c, where the parking setback is 100 feet is required, and we are proposing 21.3, and that is the parking spaces that run parallel to the right-of-way. It's 21.3 along that entire length along Morgan Lane.
Scaled mean?
I think scaled is what she used to actually measure on the paper print and came up with 20 feet, but we had it dimensioned at 21.3. It says here maximum floor area ratio, and this is not, it was asking us to confirm in testimony needed for the size of the condo unit 3. It wasn't listed here, but it was on the cover sheet. It was 0.003, 0.004. So that's in compliance with the ordinance for the FAR so I just want to note that it's not a variance.
We don't need relief.
We don't need relief, but it was questioned here. The next one is the minimum sign right-of-way setback for the freestanding sign. And this was the setback measured from the right-of-way of Route 22, and this is from section 126-195F11A. And this is a design waiver, not a variance. It's a waiver request for the sign setback from the main highway, and the ordinance requires 25, and we're asking for 8 feet for that sign setback. The next one is for the number of freestanding signs on the property. And this is from section 126-195E4. This is also a waiver. And it's the ordinance allows one freestanding sign, and the site is proposed, it actually has 2 existing freestanding signs, and we're asking for a 3rd. So just for reference, and it's actually not shown on Exhibit A5, so I'm going to go back to Exhibit A3. We talked about the sign for the Starbucks here on 22. There's also an existing sign out by Morgan Lane that was going to be retrofitted with the new hotel name. And there's also an existing pylon sign here off of at the main entrance on 22 that was also going to be updated with the new hotel tenant signage as well. So those 2 signs exist, one on Morgan, one on 22, and we were asking for a 3rd for the Starbucks.
All right, and Mr. Michelle, I'm going to stop you there before you hop onto page 4. I appreciate you going through all this, but we're definitely going to pick this up at the next meeting. What I do want to do is open it up to members of the public that have so patiently sat here to ask questions on your testimony thus far, and I'm going to give members of the public that show up at the next meeting another opportunity to question Mr. Michelle when he completes his testimony. So anyone that has any questions, come on up, ask them now. I know that questions can be forgotten, and I want to make sure you have an opportunity tonight to ask them. Please.
Again, my name is John Merton, 184 Adamsville Road. Mr. Michelle, you've shown how there is a flow that goes through the site, not just a standalone assessment for Starbucks. Right? So, if there's a lot of discussion about the traffic and the number of cars that could be going into or circulating around Starbucks. But from what unless I'm wrong, there seems to be a significant pinch point by cars that decide to go through the pay, make that left, and try to go across. Because they could be going across traffic that's trying to come in and get into your lanes. Plus, you also described the flow of people from maybe Houlihan's or the hotel that might want to go that way as another means of egress, perhaps out through to Morgan Lane. So there's a significant pinch point there on your flow. I get a sense that we're supposed to assess this as a singular site entity, but there seems to be all significant points where there's commingling of a relationship between the entire site that cannot be ignored. And from my get the sense that this is perceived to be the best design and flow for the constriction of the blue line or per the entire site for that Starbucks?
So again, I think when you look at it, it is looking at it from an overall site perspective. You're right. It's not just focused solely on Starbucks, because you do have the opportunity to maneuver around the site. No different than if I'm in a retail shopping center. Or any other
Exactly.
type of location. So
Yeah.
that being said, I do want to point out that while you may refer to this as a pinch point, I don't necessarily agree. There's a stop bar here, which does control the flow of vehicles into this drive lane. So there is a control of traffic at this point where a car would stop here before they would move into this lane. I don't know if you'd have cars blocking or anything like that, but there is a controlled here with a stop condition for cars. And we'll certainly look at this in a little bit more detail. We've heard a lot of comments tonight from the board, and we're not going to say that this is the ultimate final plan, but we want to look at it a little bit more. But I understand your concern about what's happening here, because there are cars coming off of here.
And well, it's really to that right corner there where.
Understood.
Yeah, and because it seems to me, being a layperson, that if you were to take advantage of a little further up posturing of that site, you could do a lot more to alleviate the traffic flow. But again, that seems to be a constricture of the applicant's intent to perhaps put it where it is by what you delineated previously by that blue line of area condominium 1.
Well, I mean, again, we're also limited to there's other improvements around here. You're not going to move the parking for the Houlihan's. You're not going to move the parking for the hotel. You do have, and again, we have an 1.5 acre site to work with, so I'm not saying we can't look to make some adjustments to the layout, which we certainly heard this evening from the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's try and get one more question in.
Well, once again, Bill Freeland from V as in Victor, REELAND, 7 Stanford Drive. Could you go back to A2? Thank you. Okay. The where it says Morgan Lane, and let's see, the distance between Morgan Lane and the other exit on Route 22 East. Would you know the distance between those 2 points?
From Route 22 to Morgan Lane, this distance?
No, the one from Morgan Lane to Route 22, the other entrance or exit to the old Houlihan's.
You mean this
Yes.
distance?
Yes.
I think it's roughly 90. I think it's roughly 550, 600 feet. The frontage is like 670 feet along the site, so maybe it's like 600
Okay.
feet, roughly.
Would you concede that Route 22 East, the hours of say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is pretty full?
It's a state highway, yes.
Yes, no question. So anything that's added here is going to create more traffic, not only on Route 22 East, but also on Morgan Lane.
I'm going to defer the traffic counts to our traffic.
Okay, fine. It was requested here from the old board to put 1 or 2 speed bumps on Morgan Lane, and we were told that would be looked into.
When you say old board, wasn't this?
That's from like 2019.
So the planning board?
The planning board,
old
yes.
administration.
Yes.
And I bet you never heard from them, did you?
No, did not. I think that would be a good idea since the speed limit on that road is 25 miles per hour, and that's often exceeded.
What I will do for you is we have a new administration since 2019 that was elected in 2020. I will personally reach out to them to put that on. I don't know what will happen, but I will let them know that it was brought up at this meeting, and I will ask them to review that and get us an answer. If
Thank
it
you.
can be done. You're welcome.
I would certainly.
You're right about that. I'd caution you that anything like a speed bump on a municipal road would have to come from the town council.
Yeah,
not
we have
from
nothing to
this
do with
board.
it. I can
Okay,
recommend it
okay.
and say that it was asked about, and then it would be up to them.
One thing, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. The other thing there, if you look at Morgan Lane, as it goes out to Route 22, about the same distance or so, give or take a little, is the exit to, or entrance onto Route 287 South. And my concern is that someone, okay, if they were going to try to get onto 287 South from Route 22 East, I would try the other exit as opposed to going out of the one from Morgan Lane. So,
I'll defer that to our traffic engineer.
Oh, okay.
It's a valid point. Yeah, it's a valid point.
Saying you get more time to make your.
yes, exactly. And because some, if this is approved, the Starbucks site, some, my guess would be some Yahoo sooner or later is going to get their cup of coffee and try to get on Route 287 South. Wham! Oh, all right.
I promise we'll have a joyous traffic discussion that will probably take up many hours.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right, and we're going to wrap up the meeting there. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Members of the public, thank you for your participation. Our next scheduled meeting is March 12th, and I believe, Mr. Smith, that you were going to continue.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and on March 12th, we will be bringing Mr. Michello back for continued both direct and questioning from the board and public. Our project architect, Mr. Horton, will be presenting the project architecture. However, my other witnesses are not available.
Okay, so there will be no traffic on March 12th.
No
That will be another fun-filled evening following that date.
Right, so
Which will
March
be determined
12th
at the March
would
12th
be
meeting.
But I expect that's probably going to take an hour and a half, maybe two.
Okay.
Mr. Michello and all the questions and architecture.
All right, and there'll be no further notice, so we'll be 7 o'clock in this room, March 12th, the continuation of tonight's hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to pick up with Mr. Michello, and members of the public, again, you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions on this testimony.
Right, and
Leave them?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
And just so that everyone is aware, this board has asked a lot of questions, and a lot of them are going to be answered indirect on the 12th. So I just wanted everybody to know.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Can I have a motion?
Second.
All right, thank you. Yeah, good luck, Bruce.
Thank you. March 12th.
Use the schedule, second.